Good evening, and welcome to the Canadian Federation of Agriculture's 2025 Leaders Debate. I'm Shaun Haney with RealAgriculture.com and Real Ag Radio, and it's my honor to serve as tonight's co-moderator for this evening's debate. I'd also like to introduce my co-moderator, Mr. Martin Ménard.
Bonsoir à tous et à toutes.
Good evening. My name is Martin Ménard. I'm a journalist with La Terre de Chez, Nous and co-moderator here for this debate in the context of these 2025 federal elections. We will have some French questions, some good answers, some pertinent answers, I'm sure. Stay with us. Have a good evening.
Before we meet tonight's political representatives, I'd like to acknowledge that the Canadian Federation of Agriculture is the national voice for over 190,000 Canadian farmers and farm families. We'd also like to thank our event sponsor, Food, Health and Consumer Products of Canada, for supporting this important conversation. We're pleased to welcome viewers from coast to coast to coast tonight to the debate, and it's being broadcast with simultaneous interpretation. This evening, we'll focus on the critical issues shaping Canadian agriculture, from trade and labor to regulatory modernization, infrastructure, and more. With the federal election set for April 28th, not too far away, we're looking forward to hearing from each of the five major Canadian political parties and where they stand on some of these vital topics. Agriculture is the cornerstone of Canada's economy. The sector contributes more than $150 billion to our GDP. Supports 1 in 9 Canadian jobs, and is a global leader in sustainable production and innovation. In 2023, Canada ranked as the 8th largest agricultural exporter in the world, with exports surpassing a staggering $99 billion. These issues matter not only to those that live and work in this great industry of agriculture, but for all Canadians. Now I'm going to go over some of the ground rules for tonight's debate. Candidates drew slots before the event to determine the speaking order. We'll begin with a 2-minute opening statement from each participant. Then we're going to have the debate structured into 2 parts. So the first round is going to be 5 questions. Each candidate has up to 2 minutes to respond, followed by a bit of an open bear pit, an open discussion for 2 minutes per question. Then we're going to have a 5-minute break. Participants will remain in the studio, and a bilingual sponsor video is going to be shown during the break. Then we're going to get into the second round. We're going to have 4 more questions with the same format as previously. To close, each candidate will have 1 minute for final remarks, delivered in reverse order of their opening statements. Now let's introduce our candidates. First, I want to introduce from the New Democratic Party, Ms. Heather Ray.
Good morning.
From the Green Party, Dr. Maria Rodriguez. Representing the Liberal Party, Mr. Kody Blois. From the Bloc Québécois, Mr. Yves Perron.
Bonjour tout le monde.
And finally, from the Conservative Party of Canada, Mr. John Barlow.
Thank you for having me.
We'll begin with the candidate who drew the first speaking slot. Up first, it is Dr. Maria Rodriguez.
Thank you, Shaun and Martin, and thanks so much to the CFA for this invitation and this opportunity to be here today and to share the Green Party vision in this election. They say every election is about something, an issue that dominates all the others. And this election, I think the dominant issue is trade, of course. And when we talk about trade, what we're really talking about is sovereignty. And if there's a silver lining in this unfortunate situation with the tariff, is that it has forced us to look inward. And agriculture needs to be at the center of this conversation because the control of our food supply is essential to our sovereignty. This is an election about sovereignty. So we hear every day that Canada is a trading country, that we need to export because we will always produce more than we consume. But the single biggest customer of Canadian agriculture is not the United States. It's actually Canada. I looked that up. We at the Green Party think that, yes, we need to support efforts to diversify our exports and trade relationships. But the centerpiece of our plan is and has been for years around strengthening our domestic market and our internal trade. And both conservative and liberal governments are now talking about this a lot, but they have not known that this is important for a very long time. So the domestic markets offer many opportunities, and to leverage them, we need to reorient government investments and initiatives to empower our producers and develop those markets. A green government will build and expand local and regional food processing distribution infrastructure, invest in east-west infrastructure, 9 seconds, and incentivize the system of local and regional food hubs. So that way, we will run out of time. Sorry.
From the Conservative Party, Mr. Barlow.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me today. And despite the challenges that agriculture is facing, I am extremely optimistic of the potential of Canadian agriculture. We need to start talking about agriculture, what it actually is, and that is food production and food security, not only around the world, but certainly here at home. And I believe that we are at a crossroads. The reason that I'm optimistic about Canadian agriculture is we grow here in Canada what the world needs. We grow sustainable, nutritious, affordable food that not only feeds Canadians, but certainly feeds the world. But when I say we're at a crossroads, I say that because we have two distinct directions that we can go with this election. We can go in a direction that has been the last 9 years, where it's neglect and disdain almost for Canadian agriculture, where it's making us, with policies, less competitive, limiting our trade opportunities and our markets around the world. We can then choose a different path that sees agriculture for what it is, an economic engine, not only for this country, but addressing food security around the world. The federal government can't solve all of agriculture's problems, but there are some issues that the federal government must be a partner with. You must have a competitive tax and regulatory regime. You must have access to markets. You must have a reliable supply chain. You must have access to labor. And in my opinion, and I think the opinion of most producers and stakeholders, is the current Liberal government has failed on almost all of these metrics. It is time to put Canadian farmers first, and you'll do that by unleashing Canadian agriculture, by removing these punishing regulations and legislation, by removing the carbon tax on everything for everyone forever, removing fertilizer tariffs, which are making input costs unimaginable. The key is to put Canadian farmers first. We're not going to tell farmers how to farm anymore. We're going to be a partner to Canadian producers right across this country and unleash the potential of Canadian agriculture.
From the Bloc Québécois, Mr. Perron.
Bonjour tout.
Good morning, good evening to all. It's a pleasure for me to be with you here. Yves Perron from Berthier-Masquinon. I've been here since 2019, and I'm looking forward to continuing. I am an agri-food spokesperson at the Bloc. Agriculture is at the basis of everything. You know that politically there's a big challenge, and that is that people in agriculture are not that numerous. So often they are marginalized because of the weight of their vote. But without those people, there's nothing else. They are at the basis. We have to respect our farmers. It's absolutely essential. So I see this in 3 ways. First of all, food resilience. We need to feed our population, and we need to be able to develop the industry. So there are different approaches, aspects. Yes, supply management needs to be protected, specifically in the current context, but it can't be in competition with other sectors. On the contrary, it ensures stability. We have to help to develop new markets as well. I have worked on developing the Asia-Pacific zone. We have a free trade agreement with Europe that's very advantageous, and we should use it more. There are non-tariff barriers that we have to deal with to be able to produce. And the second aspect is environmental aspects. We cannot put all of the responsibility on your shoulders. The state needs to support. The weight needs to be shared around. And the third element is standard reciprocity. Very important, because to be on the market, you have to be able to be equal. And equal means same requirements for what comes in from outside to what we require of Canadians here. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this debate.
From the NDP, Ms. Heather Ray.
I'm a mom I'm a sixth-generation farmer.
Je suis productrice de 6e génération et je veux être le prochain membre.
With the NDP. I grew up in agriculture, born and raised on a beef cattle farm in East Central Ontario, surrounded by strong female role models like my grandmother who could outwork a teenage farmhand well into her 70s. We spent our family vacations showing cattle around Canada and mowing hay in the summers as our fun times. Sadly, family farms like the one I grew up on are disappearing across Canada. Liberals and Conservatives have consistently put corporate profits ahead of people, and nowhere is that more obvious than in agriculture. Over the past 25 years, Canadian farm debt has doubled. Agribusiness corporations now take 95% of all farm revenues, leaving only 5% for farmers to feed their families with. As a result, Canada has lost more than 2/3 of its young farmers since 1991. New Democrats understand that good Canadian food is the heart of our homes, our communities, and our economy. In the face of the climate crisis and the Donald Trump trade war, New Democrats will always stand with farmers. I will always stand with farmers. We'll deliver strong financial support when times get tough and work directly with farmers to build a climate plan they can be proud of. We'll also crack down on the corporate profiteering that Liberal and Conservative governments have allowed to flourish, hurting Canadian farmers and driving up cost of families. Because at the end of the day, if we want to protect our food supply, strengthen our rural communities, and keep the next generation on the land, then we need a government that puts farmers first, and that's what New Democrats will do.
Thank you. And finally, from the Liberal Party, Mr. Blois.
Thank you very much, Shaun. Thank you, Martin, and to everyone at the Canadian Federation of Agriculture and Rogers TV for bringing us together for this really important discussion. I want to start by saying there are real challenges out there. We are living in a very uncertain world, and this is a crucial moment for Canada. And under the leadership of Mark Carney as our Prime Minister and our Liberal leader, I would submit to viewers that we have not only the best plan to hold the country together in an uncertain world, but we will have the best and strongest plan to help drive agriculture forward. When the Prime Minister asked me to serve in the capacity as Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, he said, I'm doing this for a number of reasons. One, you know the file, but two, I want to make sure that agriculture is in the driver's seat of our plan to have the strongest and fastest growing economy in the G7. But there is a lot of uncertainty out there. We have Chinese tariffs on Canadian canola, on peas, on pork, and we have instability with our American partners in terms of what the certainty looks like for that market. But we have had some successes. We have walked back Conservative cuts to the Business Risk Management Program. We've increased the actual supports under the SCAP, the Canadian Agriculture Partnership. We put over $1 billion on farm investment into reducing emissions and to drive innovation. And we've been there to stand shoulder to shoulder with our supply managed farmers and invest in agri-food processing. But we have more to do because right now is a critical time and the crossroads that Mr. Barlow talked about are crucial. We will have the best plan. Et maintenant, la question est très simple.
The question is very simple. Who is the best team for you, for your sector, so that we can face all the challenges that we have ahead of us? And now, with the importance of protecting the sector, we need to work with stakeholders and farmers to find new markets and to increase agri-food capacities in Canada. Team Liberal has a concrete plan, and I'm looking forward to discussing with my colleagues here today. Thank you very much.
To it. It's round one. Let's get to our first 5 questions. And each candidate or each representative will have 2 minutes to respond to each of the questions. So question 1. Agriculture and food processing is the largest manufacturing sector in the country. Contributes over $150 billion to Canada's GDP in 2023. Global demand for food is projected to increase by 50% by 2050. If elected to form the next government, what are your top 2 to 3 priorities to promote Canadian agriculture and agri-food both at home and abroad? Start with Dr. Rodriguez.
Well, I think that what we, the Greens, have been saying is that we have not leveraged all the opportunities that exist within Canada. The domestic market is one priority that we think that we need to address. Of course, we do need to diversify our trading partners, and we need to diversify not only our trading partners, but we need to diversify this industry, because there's strength in diversity. Perhaps we have become too focused in some very big, very powerful sectors, and the incentives have not been as effective for other sectors. I was talking with organic farmers in my writing, and one example of diversification that is interesting is organics. This sector has a lot of potential with the grain supported, because it's environmentally uses less chemicals, petrochemicals, etc. And there is lots of market potential, both domestic and international, but there are challenges, and the organic sector is not growing. But for example, in Quebec, it has been growing, because then there's policies that assist organic farmers in transitioning, which is a costly thing, because you have to farm for 3 years in order to be certified organic and have access to the standard, all the equivalence agreements, etc. And it is possible to do this federally, but we haven't done it yet. And this is just one of many examples where diversification will help us. So domestic market, diversification of markets, and production.
Thank you. I think this is a critical question, certainly with the challenges that we're facing around the world, certainly south of the border, but in Europe and in Asia. I think this is two parts to this answer, and the first part would be, how do we develop markets right here at home? And I think that's the importance of eliminating these interprovincial trade barriers, which are holding back our producers from being able to trade their products within our own country, which is our most important and most lucrative free trade agreement, is the one that we don't have. A true Canadian free trade agreement would be an additional $150 billion of GDP that we are missing out on. And I certainly have ranchers in my riding who would love to be able to move their product into BC or into Saskatchewan, but because of these ridiculous barriers, whether that's transportation or Canadian Food Inspection Agency and different regulations on processing, we are really limiting our opportunities right here at home. But as part of that is also increasing consumer trust in the Canadian product. But when you have policies that the Liberals have put on Canadian agriculture, like pesticide reductions, fertilizer tariffs, the carbon tax, front of package labeling, warning labels on Canadian food, the message you are sending to Canadian consumers is we don't even trust our farmers, which is just, the science does not back up those policies. We have to build that trust with Canadian consumers and start as a federal government backing our farmers and telling Canadians just how strong they are, their innovation, their environmental stewardship, and those types of vision. On the international side, we are no longer a trusted and reliable trading partner because we can't get our products to market. We can't get them to the ports. We need to work with the Rail Alliance to have interswitching to give farmers and exporters options. We need to ensure that we have pipelines that are being built, moving grain off rail, or moving oil off rail, giving grain more opportunities to move its product. And we need to restructure or retool CFA and PMRA to ensure that we are able to get approvals to move these products.
Alors, bonjour, merci pour la...
Thank you for the question. Indeed, in our priorities, as you know, we have been for a long time committed to supply management sectors. So that's the commitment. In my introduction earlier, I said it's not to be in competition with sectors. On the contrary, we want to favor and help other production to develop their markets. And Canada starts to stand up and defend itself when we sign international agreements, because we realize that foreign products come in and ours can't leave. With Europe, for example, our meat doesn't have access. That doesn't make any sense, because in production with exports, we need to fix that. And then regulations. We need to facilitate the lives of our producers. Our producers need to have access to labor, foreign labor, other types of labor. There's a lot of bureaucracy. And what we produce on our farms needs to be processed as well. So for the agri-food sector, we believe that we have to increase foreign workers to 30%. That's essential. Globally as well, we have to be aware of climate change. To Mr. Barlow, I would say that pipelines have nothing to do with agriculture. It's not because we want to facilitate interprovincial trade that we're going to allow that type of thing, but we have to adapt our risk management programs because climate change exists. It is there. And it's not up to farmers alone to hold and shoulder that burden. We have to share risk. We've had some nice announcements recently just before the elections in partnership with Quebec. We need money pumped into those projects, and it needs to be serious because if we don't support our farmers, they will no longer be there. That's essential. So we need you, and our regulations need to be consistent, and we need to walk the talk. So we need to act, and regulation needs to be present. Yes, it does, but we need to facilitate farmers' lives.
There's a lot of similarities between what needs to happen in agriculture and what needs to happen in other sectors around Canada as well. What we're seeing is this big loss of the middle. We're seeing a downward decline of the middle class, and we're seeing that in agriculture. We're struggling to have young farmers take over farms through succession plannings. We're making it difficult for underserved communities to join agricultural endeavors, and we're making it corporately driven. And something you're going to hear me say again and again is a farmer is not a farmer is not a farmer. These one farmer fits all policies are no longer going to work when we see such an amount of wealth and concentration of power at the top, and yet farmers, everyday farmers, small businesses are struggling when inputs are skyrocketing in cost. So we need to grow that middle. We need to decrease and make it more affordable and more enticing for young farmers and new farmers to get into agriculture. We need to make sure that farmers are first. And when I say the farmers, I don't mean the corporatization of large conglomerate agriculture. I mean the mom and pop farmers, the family farms that are the construct and the fabric of our country and our communities. We need diversification. We need to make sure that our provincial borders are able to trade. We also need to make sure that there's trust being built with farmers in our government. I asked my dad this morning what he thinks about trade, and he said, I don't trust the government to trade in a way that puts me first. We need to stop that. We need to make sure that our farmers are able to trade under the same regulation as other entities at other countries around the world, but without compromising our future and our future generations, without compromising our soil health, and without compromising our future with climate change crisis.
Shaun, I just want to, I've heard a lot, but just the question was around manufacturing and export. Could you just repeat the question so I've got it here?
If elected to form the next government, what are your top 2 to 3 priorities to promote Canadian agriculture and agri-food, both home and abroad? Okay.
Certainly in terms of agri-food capacity, what our promise is to actually have a $200 million domestic processing fund. And I would reiterate to the folks at home, we are the only party amongst those who are standing here that have 6 concrete priorities about what we would actually do. $200 million is a good start. We're going to work to build upon that because we know that there needs to be more agri-food capacity in this country. We're committing to $30 million under the agri-marketing initiatives. Again, Canada feeds the world. I would agree with that. But we need to be able to work with industry partners to go find those new markets to be able to get access. On CFIA, I've had really constructive conversations with the president of CFIA about ensuring that we have boots on the ground in terms of phytosanitary and the regulatory requirements. It's fine to have market access in a general sense, but if you don't actually have access because of regulatory burden, that is a challenge, and that is going to be something that our government, certainly if I'm still the minister in 13 days, we're going to be focused on that to be able to make it happen. I also see tremendous opportunity in the Indo-Pacific. I had a great conversation with our representative in the Indo-Pacific office, Ms. Kelly. Obviously, with what's happening around the world, those are really important, crucial markets that we have to build up. There was a conversation around ports. We have a commitment in our platform, $5 billion to continue to invest in our ports. It is absolutely crucial. We need to make sure that that is there. Et spécifiquement avec un pays...
Specifically with the countries, the Prime Minister have visited Europe, and the importance... I had a good conversation with the Mexican secretary to the agriculture, I believe that this is a good strategy for us to engage.
One thing I'm going to jump in right quick on is, one of the things that I think is important is I had 9 days in the portfolio before we went to the RIP period, but we've already been moving on the constructive red tape reduction that we need on CFIA. Mr. Barlow and I would agree that that agency needs a push. I give full credit to the president. He responded. Friday, I was put into the role. By Monday, we had 9 concrete measures that we're going to work on. You re-elect a Liberal government. If I'm still in that portfolio, that is absolutely going to be a crucial aspect because we need to reduce red tape. Farmers don't want just a billion-dollar program.
They could have done any of these measures for 9 years, 10 years now, and they've done none of it. I don't know why farmers were trusted now. And it's not just a push. CFIA is the most obstructionist agency within the government that is holding Canadian farmers back. And you say you have this product, this fund to bring
Shaun,
processing,
Well,
if you don't have, you're not going to
I
attract.
find interesting, yes, I find interesting that both the conservative and the liberal debaters are talking about all of these and are talking about interprovincial trade barriers, etc. Because I worked in the agriculture department 20 years, and we were talking about all of these during liberal and conservative governments. And one time I walked into this meeting, and my boss and I were, we have to strengthen the domestic market. And what we were told by the senior management was, why? We have the world to our disposal.
Mr. Perron.
Yeah.
OK.
Yeah.
Ici, on parle de
We're talking about cutting red tape. I asked the Standing Committee on Agriculture to give a questionnaire simplified to reduce it has not been adopted. There's no credit there. No one can protect the supply management. We need the bloc to defend this.
I think the Ottawa knows best approach isn't working for Canadian farmers. The Liberal and Conservatives have definitely not stood up and fought enough for the farmers and what they need. And I think it's time for a change between the two.
Okay, in the open discussion, we're going to have to be quicker with our responses. Okay, let's get to question 2. So question 2. With recent trade tensions bringing global competitiveness considerations to the fore, and there's long-standing calls from many in the agri-food industry to streamline regulations, to what extent should the Government of Canada prioritize regulatory reform and red tape reduction in the agricultural sector? And if so, if you believe that, what do you see as the priorities for regulatory modernization to ensure the sector stays competitive while ensuring food safety and environmental protection and market stability are not compromised? Mr. Barlow, your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you. I think this is one of the most important questions facing Canadian agriculture, certainly with the challenges that we're seeing around the world. We need to be strengthening our economy and our industries here in Canada and be proud of our resources, energy, mining, forestry, and certainly agriculture. We were just talking about CFA and PMRA as an example of those two agencies. We need to retool those agencies to add an economic lens to their mandate to ensure that they are understanding when they make decisions. There is an economic impact to those decisions. But we also as the Conservative Party, we are saying that you will get a response on applications and new permits within 60 days to ensure that we are able to reach that potential. For example, I'll give you 2 examples. We have Vive Innovation here in Canada, a Canadian-made company that is making crop protection products. It has 14 of its products approved in the United States and only 1 here in Canada. We have Solvit, a veterinary veterinary medicine company in Calgary, who's now thinking of moving its entire operation to the United States because it can't get approvals for products here. And the current government has sat on approvals for 3-NOP, delayed decisions on gene editing. These are decisions that must happen quickly for us to remain competitive, not only competitive, but world-leading. And that's the potential that Canadian innovation and agriculture has here. But we're continually held back. And as Mr. Blois said, he's given CFIA a push. CFIA needs more than a push. It needs to have a complete retool of its mandate and start being a partner to Canadian agriculture, not being an adversary. And until those things are addressed, we are not going to be able to move. And lastly, I would like us to join the United States, other like-minded countries, Brazil, Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, with a sustainable growth partnership where we work on regulations that we can, rather than doing the same science over and over again, we work together to approve those products.
Merci pour la question. Écoutez,
it takes more flexibility, and the state should not abandon its role. The role of the state is essential. Mr. Barlow mentioned that the regulation, it's the state that manages the registers. It's not a question to oppose the new technologies, but to establish the right framework and to understand what's necessary. This is essential for this. Also, when we talk about regulation and we talk about trade between the provinces and Quebec, we've always agreed with this. We should do more trade to facilitate this, but we have to be careful. There are certain standards, restrictions that we have to keep. And we talk about pipeline when there's interprovincial trade. There's certain things that we need to be coherent on when we talk about standardization of the products. I appreciated the comments of Mr. Barlow. We need more flexibility and to be more efficient, but you need the right resources. We should perhaps establish partnerships with other jurisdictions to share our expertise, to have better efficiencies. But it's nonsensical when what we've lived throughout the years in Canada and throughout the country where production was forbidden because of a change of recipe and standardization. We found ourselves where our locals could not produce the merchandise. We had to import this from the States where we had the product right here. It takes a reciprocity of the standards. What we ask of our people, it should be required from what comes from abroad or from other countries. We should allocate the resources where necessary. The tariffs, there's a DNA test that was for poultry. The government says, yes, it's interesting, but it's all talk and nothing's being done. Should we not trust the people in the industry and establish it on a scientific basis?
Regulations are great when they're used in the right way for the right purpose. Unnecessary regulations, such as restrictions on seed saving, further drive up costs for cash-strapped farmers where multinational corporations rake in the profits. And that's really what we're down to. Who are these regulations for, and what purpose are they really serving? American seed and chemical corporations are lobbying the Liberals to overhaul Canada's seed regulations, changes that would limit farmers' access, raise costs, and silence our voice in future decisions, all to boost corporate profits. Meanwhile, Mark Carney still refuses to disclose whether he holds stakes in the companies that stand to gain. Without New Democrats to hold them accountable, the Liberals will put profit ahead of Canadians and ahead of Canadian farmers. Pierre Poilievre and Mr. Barlow voted to extend the seed royalty period from 18 years to 20 years and gave seed and chemical corporations the ability to sue farmers for saving seed. For your reference, that is Bill C-18 in 2024. The NDP was the only party opposing these changes then, and we will always fight to stop Conservatives and their corporate buddies from ripping off you and Canadian farmers. New Democrats will always fight against corporate greed. We will cut regulations that benefit large corporations and hurt everyday farmers while defending policies that keep our food safe and ensure the highest quality standards are met from farm to table.
Thank you very much, Shaun. This is really what I want to make an absolute priority focus of. Again, if I'm back in this role in about 12 days, we have already started to lay the groundwork on that. We have 9 measures that CFIA has committed to, which are non-cost, but all about driving competitiveness and reducing red tape. This is going to be a priority. You know, Mr. Barlow runs down CFIA, and I absolutely agree that there needs to be changes, that there needs to be a culture of actually trying to facilitate rather than get in the way, and sometimes that is problematic. But when you run down down an agency, and then also say in the same time that we should be proud of the Canadian standard and the fact that we have products that go all around the world. CFIA plays a role in that. So I believe in the role that they play, but I think we have to be actually driving the political message that right now, as the regulator, they have to be focused in that jurisdiction. Again, I absolutely will commit that an economic and food security lens will be placed on every decision that is before PMRA and also CFIA. And so in terms of, I want to give you an example, Shaun. When I was on the job, April 1st came and has since passed, we were asked about regulatory review. I said, no, I'm not signing off on that, because when I come back to this job, I want to make sure that we can actually drive forward. I want to have a comprehensive look at every single regulatory structure that we have under Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and obviously under our agencies, because we have to do that exact work. Now is the time. We absolutely have to do it. You know that I've been a champion of that as a member of Parliament, and I'll be a champion of that if we are returned into government. On interprovincial trade, good news. The Prime Minister and our premiers have already agreed by July 1st that is going to be in place. Good news that we have alignment across the board on that, but we're already working on that in government. And the other piece that I want to talk to about is organic sector. I know that they have sent information along. Great opportunity to facilitate our organic trade here in this country. We have to be able to lay the regulatory framework for that to happen. And avec la réciprocité des normes, Monsieur Perron, je suis d'accord.
Reciprocity of the standards, I agree with that proposition. We must make sure that facilitate that and that the science be the guiding force with the CFIA to facilitate this.
Very, very important topic, extremely important. And the problem with regulatory modernization is that it's a big blanket term. And when we talk about regulatory modernization, we're talking about a bunch of different things. And sometimes people, what they mean is deregulation, which is not the same thing at all. When we regulate, we're regulated for somebody, and we should be regulating for the public interest. That's why I agree with everything that most of you have said. So, yes, everybody understands that we need to reduce the administrative burden of some of these processes, because a lot of it is administrative burden, and we also have to leave room for innovation, but we still have to realize that when we regulate, we're protecting somebody, we're protecting the public and the public interest. And now, with regulation, the public and the private interest not always quite align, which is a point that Heather was bringing up. And so, Monsieur Perron, so now it seems to be that it's in fashion to use this word agile, about making a regulation more agile, and I think that's really fine, but I think we still need to be careful that with all that agility, we don't cut some corner and trip and fall and break something. And that something that we can break, it can be human health, it can be environmental health. This idea of making very, very agile these regulations about gene editing, for example, and the influence that industry has had in that, well, let's not go too fast, because there's an environment where you're going to put that stuff. And so regulation is to protect the public, and the criterion is to be balanced, to prioritize the public interest and this ability of industry to get the job done, and we try to protect, sorry.
It's now time for it's time for our 2-minute open discussion on this question.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Blois of his 9 things he's asking CFIA to do. I didn't hear anywhere in there that you are going to reverse the policies on the front of pack labeling, the P2 plastics ban, which the United States has already said are trade irritants. Now, Mark Carney wants to bring in a carbon border adjustment. That's more regulations, more red tape. Those 2 policies alone are $14 billion to the industry, and 34% increase on food prices.
Not only do you guys want to move off the industrial price where we could actually reward farmers for the ecological services, how much taxpayers' dollars are you guys going to spend to reduce emissions with the actually economically inefficient way on how much money you're going to spend on ITCs? Shaun, I want to say one thing. On trusted jurisdiction, on CFIA, we have already moved. The feed additives that are already approved in Europe and in the United States are going to be fast-tracked now with the measures that we took just before. Under my leadership and under the leadership of Mark Carney, we're going to be focused on this even more moving forward.
Mr. Perron?
Dans la réglementation,
In the We are between people who want to remove everything and people who talk a lot but don't move on these topics. We need the resources within our institutions, within CFIA. What I've mentioned, we're not against technology, on the contrary, but it's not normal. But the people who will pocket all the profits that write the regulation, I've never understood that we're the only party that denounces this.
Yes, I 100% agree. The other thing with CFIA and resources is why is it so slow?
So the front line, the people who do the work is what we need more, not less. Otherwise, everything just gets slowed down. PMRA, same thing. Removing the resources from those organizations, it's not going to do any good if we want to get things to move faster.
They've added a political layer to
We're
PMRA,
not
they're taking it
actually
out of the science, they're
proposing
making
to
it
remove
political.
anything. We're proposing to actually use the trusted science of other trusted jurisdictions.
No, you put a
Well,
political
that
layer.
is okay.
You put a political layer in PMRA, you take it out of science.
what we should be
You're
doing.
ignoring the
Exactly.
science,
No, we're
you're
not.
ignoring the science.
Fantastic. It's now time for question 3. I'll pass it off to my co-moderator, Martin.
Yeah. Question numéro.
Question number 3 on risk management. Disease outbreaks, trade actions, and climate change are constant threats to the growth of Canada's agricultural sector. Farmers say Canada's current suite of risk management programs do not adequately respond to these challenges. The question is, what will your party do to ensure farmers have access to risk management programs that address producers' concerns? Mr. Perron.
Question, très bonne question. Je n'ai mentionné.
Thank you for the question. I mentioned risk management in my introduction, belonging to Canada. It doesn't work at all. The partnership between provinces doesn't work either. We need to stop wanting to have coast-to-coast measures. We have to start to take into consideration in the field realities. They are different in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Quebec, for instance. I also talked about deregulation for climate. It affects everyone. We can't ask our producers, I'm thinking about vegetable producers, to ensure the clouds. We had rains and then drought. The premiums were multiplied by 5. The payback will be difficult. It doesn't work. It's a vicious circle, and we need to improve it. And one of the things that I find disappointing is the slowness of negotiations. The partnerships will end in 2028. Announcements were made, there were intentions, but will money come? Will money follow? Because we could have great programs with a great announcement off a balcony with wind in our hair, but then people realize that there isn't money because there was only such a small amount. So it's essential to work on that. We need to work with our producers, our farmers, and over and above risk management, we have to help improve things so that these insurance systems can ensure biodiversity. We are encouraging monocultures right now. If a farmer wants to have several crops, well, if there's an issue with one, they're not insured. And so we have lots of discussions on the environment, we'll protect the planet, et cetera, but concretely we're moving backwards, and that's not good. And biodiversity is in a number of sectors. So for cows, cattle, for example, we have people talking about nitrogen and what comes out of the cows, but can we be smart and work with our prairies, with our pastures, so that if ever there are fires, and those will continue, can we at least adapt and adjust? And so how can we pay concretely for on-farm successes?
Hardworking Canadian farmers are what makes Canada's agricultural sector competitive, not corporations. And in order to stay competitive, farmers need support in the face of Donald Trump's trade war. When I see the risk management programs, what I see are programs that are really designed to be helpful and to be a reliance, a support system that's there just in case. We need those programs. We need to keep those programs, and New Democrats will expand and protect the business risk management programs that Canadian farmers and producers rely on to weather tough times. But we can't be fully reactive in our responses to risks such as climate change. We need to be proactive. We need to think of future generations. We need to think of the future farmers and how we're going to grow our food as we move forward. And we need to make sure that we're creating a plan for climate change resiliency with farmers, with producers, so that we can make sure that there is strength and business improvements being made on how we grow our food so we can find more efficiencies, we can find more protections. And we need to make sure that what we're putting in is accessible to all levels of agriculture, not just those at the top.
Merci beaucoup, Martin. I want to start by reminding folks at home that it was the Conservative government that actually cut business risk management program. They took agri-stability from an 85% trigger down to 70%. They took the compensation from 85% down to 70%. That has hurt Canadian farmers. Our government and our party has actually reintroduced and reinvested in business risk management tools. We have increased the compensation amount when agri-stability is triggered to 80%. We also removed the reference margin limits, and we have created a livestock price index, particularly with the inclusion of the maritime provinces now all across the country. So we have a good story to tell. I want viewers at home to remember it was the Conservatives that actually cut these programs, but there's more work to be done. And right before the election, John's going to criticize it, but perhaps it was the only tool that we had, and FPTs were asking for it on additional compensation and additional programs for this year, given the uncertainty that we're facing. Our government is proposing, and we are willing to move forward on a 90% compensation when agri-stability is triggered for this program year, and we're moving the cap from 3 million up to 6 million. But we're also promising that as part of our election platform permanently. Those are really important measures. I know on cow-calf operators, these are conversations I've had with Minister Sigurdsson. We weren't able to get it necessarily before the writ was called, but my commitment to him and to my commitment to all the cattle industry across the country is that we will be open to those conversations. It's a priority for me if I'm in this role as the minister on the other side. I think I would agree with my colleagues about the need that we have to have the conversation around agri-stability, agri-recovery, and ways that we can find more flexibility to make sure that these are timely programs, that they're flexible. But those are conversations that have to happen across the FPT table. I take Monsieur Perron's point, but we have to engage with our provincial and territorial colleagues. Encore, je suis ouverte.
I am open to conversations, concrete conversations, to improve and increase success. We have essential programs for farmers across the country, and now with climate change impacts or market impacts, it is more important now than ever to have these programs in place. Thank you.
So yes, we have to give it to the current government that in the reactive thing, they have done, they have responded to the needs, the increase in the margin, the preferred margin, the agri-stability going to 80%, recently the increase in the interest-free portion of advanced payment. But agriculture is by nature high risk. It operates in an environment where the risks are very high. It's very vulnerable to economic risk, to environmental risk, and look at what happened when we're in a situation like this. And this tinkering around the edges is just one aspect of the big picture. I think that at this stage, we need a full review of the federal risk management program in the BRM business management. The current suite of BRM has been around for a couple of decades, I think, and there's been changes and there's been improvement, but we need to look at it. And I really like the point about the environmental risk fueled by climate and biodiversity crisis and the pandemic and economic disruptions, because we need to incorporate this resilience aspect of our agriculture into our business risk management. Since these programs, agri-stability, agri-insurance, etc., agri-insurance is the most expensive of them all, right? And they've been around for so long, and there have been many changes. And we have to add this flexibility that somebody mentioned to incorporate more biodiverse systems, more diversity, because now that's what we know that we didn't know when we had the 4 things that were created 20 years ago. So business management has to be reviewed as a whole.
Merci beaucoup.
Yeah.
Monsieur Barlow.
Merci beaucoup. My colleague, Mr. Boyce, is right, but the biggest business risk to Canadian farmers is Liberal government taxation and policy, and that's why they've had to step up. When the Conservatives were in government, we were working closely with Canadian agriculture and Canadian farmers, and that's why they were successful. The government's own documents show that the 2023 crop year was the most expensive in Canadian history, as input costs for fertilizer, chemical, fuel, seed was up 27%. And the net farm income was down almost 3%. And this is a direct result of Liberal government policies like carbon taxes, fertilizer tariffs, and additional regulation and restrictions. The business risk management programs don't just need additional money. These don't need just a tweak. These need to be fundamentally reviewed, and my commitment to Canadian farmers is a Conservative government will quickly meet with all the provincial agriculture and territorial agriculture ministers and reassess the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. We need to find business risk management programs that are bankable and timely. For a farmer that's had a rough year, to wait 2 years for compensation or payment, by that time, that farmer may have lost his operation. And we need to find ways to ensure that we work with farmers to make sure that they stay healthy. It's not just one thing to be environmentally sustainable, but you must be economically viable as well. And our commitment is to have a livestock price insurance program, a national program that will ensure that our ranchers are whole, and we want to grow the herd. Our herd numbers in Canada are now down to the same level they were in 1985. That's pre-BSE. We need to grow that industry, and a livestock price insurance program nationally will certainly help those ranchers as well.
Shaun, can I ask, we're in, sorry, Martin.
Merci à tous. Nous entrons dans notre question.
Thank you very much. Open questions now.
Or promise, or if that's actually Conservative Party platform document, because I have not heard a single word on agriculture so far. We're 75% into this election campaign. Not a word from Mr. Poilievre, the Conservative Party. So I respect you. I like your work. Is that your commitment, or is that the commitment of the Conservative Party here today?
Our record speaks for itself, and how we've stood up for Canadian farmers. You talk.
75%. We're on advanced polls, and you guys have not
talk
said a word
about
on agriculture.
It was a Liberal government when we needed it the most on the ranching side. You cut agri-recovery by 33% at the 11th hour. And when you talk about what you've done for agri-stability, not a single provincial ag minister knew about this. And you don't have any agreement signed with those provincial. You have not an agreement with a single provincial ag minister.
La situation, messieurs, là, c'est...
The situation is that the Conservatives cut in risk management. The Liberals are not acting. They tend to keep farmers dependent on political promises, and we want that to end. Mr. Blois, I want a commitment from you. It's complicated to look at risk management, but there's simple things. So this anticipated program, payment program at $100,000, it's ridiculous for 2025. Each year, our farmers need to fight for an increase. We increased it to 250 this year. I want to know, Mr. Blois, do you commit to increase permanently so we don't have to ask to 350,000? Well, amongst others, we have a platform with priorities. And with risk management, it's important to consult with the Quebec government. I imagine it's important to discuss with Mr. Legault.
Private players to be more in this arena.
Absolutely. We want to see private insurance take more of a role in this, like they are with crop insurance. I think that's an opportunity that we have not taken advantage of, and we'll see that for sure.
If the government doesn't have a plan of its own to protect farmers from the impacts of climate change, what will the private sector do to fill in that gap? Nothing but try to make money for themselves at the sacrifice of everyday farmers.
We do have a plan. We do have programs in place, and Shaun, I would agree.
On arrête ça là, chers amis.
Sorry.
Okay, we have to end there. Let's move on to the next question. The next question, a specific one, so it's a little bit out of the ordinary. Often in campaigns, parties like to talk about all of the new spending that they will do, but given the continued focus on Canada's deficit and the need for fiscal constraint, can you tell us where your party sees opportunities to reduce expenditures or find new efficiencies if you are elected?
We're going to fight back against corporate greed. We are going to make sure that everyday small business farmers are put first for a change. And we're going to do that by changing the way that money is made in a new way, by creating that local market. You know, small businesses, when you get into farming, you're supporting that local business first, that local food model. And so we need to see more support to make sure that small farmers can jump from a small farmer to a bigger farmer so they can reap those benefits. Right now, the benefits that are coming is for corporate farms who are able to meet the regulations, who are able to jump through the hoops, who have the money and the staffing and the backing behind them to do that. Small business Canadian farmers are struggling. Inputs are record high. The margins are low. It doesn't make sense for farmers to start being farmers anymore, and that's what we need to change. And we can change that by creating opportunities to take money in other sectors, like oil and gas, remove the subsidies on oil and gas. If we want a free market, if the Conservatives are saying that privatization is going to be the solvent of these issues, then we need to take that public money out of that sector, let them do that on their own, and bring that money to agriculture where it's going to be spent in a better way.
Et Madame Ray, où allez-vous couper?
Ray, where would you cut exactly? And it's the question for the others. Where exactly would you reduce in that sector? Where would you cut?
The New Democrats would completely get rid of all subsidies on oil and gas. These are subsidies that have been going on for far too long, and we're going to remove them completely.
Merci. Monsieur Blois.
Martin. Look, first of all, we don't intend to make this more of a priority. I mentioned at the onset that when the Prime Minister sat me down to put me in this role, he said this is going to be a foundational pillar of our growth strategy on the G7. So can be efficiencies found in government? Always. But in terms of the programs that matter for farmers, we are going to be investing in agriculture because it actually is going to grow our economy. Any politician who stands up here and suggests that we're going to have a balanced budget in 5 years with the amount of defense spending that we need to do in this country would be ludicrous. And of course, our Canadian farmers at home who are watching, they're of course farmers, but they're also Canadian citizens. And so we need to make sure that investment is happening on CAF to our men and women who serve in uniform, but we also have to have the growth strategy to pay for these important investments. So we're not intending to be able to cut in agriculture. I think there can, again, be efficiencies found. For example, I had a conversation with the president of the CFA about how can we find on the certifications and the phytosanitary requirements between countries that we trust, i.e. if a product's coming from Ireland, if a product's coming from Europe, we know that there's a true scientific process there. How do we reduce the actual requirements on that side between the agencies to actually allocate them in another way to find new markets? So those are the ways that we can create efficiency in the system without making cuts in the agriculture sector, because we need to actually be able to invest. Our government has been investing in agriculture. We've increased the Canadian Agriculture Partnership Fund by 25%. Again, that never happened under the Conservative government. We've increased in business risk management tools. I take Shaun's point about the inclusion of private sector insurance where it can make sense. That's conversations I'm open to having and our government is open, because we want to drive private sector investment. So that is our focus about how we find efficiency and how do we create and reduce red tape to drive agriculture in a way that really matters without cutting crucial programming.
Content de savoir que vous ne coupez.
I'm happy to hear that you're not cutting anything from agriculture, Mr. Blois. The budget is an operational one, and for agriculture, it's a pillar. It's fundamental for our economic growth. Ms. Rodriguez?
If we have to cut somewhere, it should not be agriculture programs, but we do need to reprofile some. Actually, Canada, compared to other countries, other advanced countries and G7, the cost of our support, the producer support estimate is not that high. We are kind of in the middle, and there's areas where we spend less than anybody else. But having said that, we do spend a lot of money that we could spend differently. And one example is, for example, research and development science, the non-BRM programs. The way these programs are, many of these programs that are industry partnership, et cetera, the way they are structured, the more money you have, the more money your backers have, or the industries behind it, the more federal funding you can get. For example, if you are a sector that has a lot of these American multinationals like Scargill, and that's your backer and it's behind you, you have a program that has matching funds. You have many more funds to match. And then if the smaller sector has $1 million and get $1 million to do research and development, this bigger sector, they have $10 million and they get much more from the federal government. So this reprofiling of how we structure these things, one good example is the matching funds. We could distribute the money in a much more equitable way, but I would not suggest that the total support for agriculture is reduced, because there are many other things that we can reduce, like the subsidies to oil and gas, for example, which is, we're still doing too much of that.
Merci. Mr. Barlow.
Merci beaucoup. And I think the question, maybe not where you find efficiencies, but how do you reprioritize the dollars that are being spent? Now, one place we can certainly find a cut, it's costing Canadian taxpayers almost $300 million since 2019 just to administer the carbon tax. And Mark Carney has said we need to have a carbon tax in Canada if we're going to reach global markets, which is completely not true. So if you get rid of a lot of bureaucrats that are administering programs like the carbon tax, like the plastics ban, like the front of pack labeling, which are not only costing taxpayers dollars, but costing industry dollars and driving up food costs, that's certainly part of it. But the Auditor General did a study on a review on Agriculture Canada last fall, and it showed really horrible results in terms of the measurements and the metrics that Canada is using for some of its climate change and emissions reduction policies. In fact, there was zero results. They had no plan. So it's about reprioritizing those dollars that are going to research specifically in agriculture to ensure that we're focusing not on emissions reduction and those things that aren't having any results, but productivity is our #1 concern in Canada, where we are now 67th in the OECD. And agriculture has an incredible potential there to reverse that trend and increase that productivity. So let's invest those dollars, move them to where there's a priority, work with Canadian agriculture and farmers, and what do they need to see? This shouldn't be top down. We're telling farmers how to farm. Like, anything you want to do must be focused on emissions reduction and climate change. Obviously a very important issue I think all of us would agree on that. But completely ignoring research and innovation on new products, on new innovation on pesticides, new innovation on crop protection, seed varieties, gene editing, that will increase productivity, that will increase yield, and that will ensure that our farmers are economically viable. That is reprioritizing those dollars that are there to where they're actually going to have an impact.
Merci beaucoup. Je vous lancerai un peu sur la question.
On the question, Madame Rodriguez, on the topic of research and development and the future of agriculture, could you perhaps, Mr. Perron? I'd like to have my 2 minutes also, if I could. And what I'd like to say is that the Bloc Québécois would be opposed to any reduction in the budget in agriculture, because the budget is already paltry as it is. So I can't believe that we want to put 2% on our budget on defense. And we don't agree. And as an industrialized country, that we can't even put 1% of our budget that people who provide food for us, 44% of producers work elsewhere during the daytime because they can't make ends meet. So agriculture is a question of passion. People love what they do, and they do it in spite of all the difficulties. We have the duty to support them even more. We're talking about privatizing insurance. Already homeowners who can't insure their homes because they're flooded constantly, even a farmer who's made claims 2 years in a row, then they'll be left in the wayside. So I believe that the cuts would be in the scandals, but I'll give you a brief can. The efficiency and also accountability, people who are at the head of these programs, people who was let go. There's no oversight in these programs, and the Liberal government give contracts to enrich the private sector, and also the dental care program that put $2 billion in a private company, Sun Life, whereas these monies should be deployed in the provinces. This is where we'll save monies of scale. the scandals, the programs are not efficient, and the resources, we have to put them in the insurance programs and also within the agencies, the customs, and to increase efficiency. And this is the open. So I'll bring back on the aspect of the future on research by Alexandre. There were several cuts in research. What do you think of this?
Work with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and work with private research to do that in cooperatively. But I want to pick up on the point that John raised, which is why is the Conservative Party advocating to kill the clean fuel standard at a time that our canola and our oilseed producers in this country need more of a demand driver? That's actually smart public policy, reduces emissions, creates a good benefit on farm, and the industrial price Mr. Carney's proposing to actually reward farmers through that. You guys want to get rid of it and spend more taxpayers' dollars in an inefficient way to reduce emissions. You just said climate change is important. Why are you getting rid of the industrial price and then going and spending more taxpayers' dollars?
Monsieur Barlow.
Your carbon tax hasn't done anything other than rob Canadian taxpayers.
The only government to reduce emissions in
No,
the
it
history
hasn't,
of the
it hasn't
country.
reduced emissions, and you know
It
that
has.
the stats show, no, it hasn't. It's been very minimal, if anything. And you know that the clean fuel standard is just a second carbon tax on consumers. It's 17 cents a litre right now, and you know
No,
that.
it's not,
We
John.
will absolutely
That is
have a
not true.
Madame Rodriguez.
biofuels policy that will
What
ensure
is
that
your
we have
plan?
that opportunity there, but we're not going to continue to punish Canadians with
More
carbon tax after
taxpayers'
carbon
dollars.
tax after carbon
More
tax.
taxpayers' dollars.
Another thing that I noticed, John, is when you mentioned that we need more research in things like genetics and we need to put more money in that. Well, you know what? The way this has been working for an extended period of time now is that the public researchers from the government, from Agriculture Canada, they go and they develop varieties, et cetera, and then they get licensed to seed companies, that then they take them to the market.
I wish that were true.
But no, but it is true, and then you.
No, we should be making revenue off these commercializations, but Canada's not
Monsieur
doing
Perron,
La
on votre part, s'il vous
recherche, la
plaît.
recherche, M. Ménard, c'est un autre secteur où le Canada manque de
This
vision.
is another sector where we should encourage the universities. We cut the funds to universities. We've got a scarcity of veterinarians. We need long-term measures to make this work. Shaun, question number 5.
Canada is one of the few countries in the world that is capable of producing more food than it consumes. However, we know that American subsidies under programs like the Inflation Reduction Act, of course there's the U.S. Farm Bill, they provide significant financial advantages to U.S. producers. Most recently, there's an ad hoc $10 billion program to assist U.S. farmers because of rising input costs and just because the market went down. With Canadian farmers also facing an uncertain trade environment, what are your party's trade priorities and how would these ensure Canadian farmers can still maintain competitiveness and grow their export markets? Mr. Boyce.
Thank you very much, Shaun, for the question. First of all, obviously Parliament was not sitting on the other side of this election. It will be, and one of the things that I think is important to highlight is the money that is being collected from reciprocal or retaliatory tariffs to the Americans can be used for agricultural programming. So that is one thing I want to put on the table. I've obviously highlighted the fact that I think the Prime Minister was smart to go to Europe. Obviously, had he had time, Indo-Pacific would have been a strategy. I've had a very constructive conversation with my Mexican counterpart. We have to continue to build those trade relationships around the world because Canada does truly feed the world. I think it is going to be incumbent on us to work very closely with CFA. They are the regulator, but working closely to say, how do we build up your boots on the ground to make sure that markets are actually available and open? Again, it's fine to have market access in theory, but if there is non-trade barriers or if the countries are actually creating challenges around the science, we have to be on the ground making sure that that happens. So that would be a priority under Liberal government. I will again re-highlight the fact that I believe we are the only party that actually has concrete platform commitments on paper in a platform that has been announced around agriculture, including $30 million more for agri-marketing initiatives. We know that that is extremely important to work with industry to be able to create those market access pathways. And the other one is trade. It's around our actual trade infrastructure. We're committing to a $5 billion trade diversification fund, specifically on strategic ports in this country to be able to create that access. So that is part of it. Obviously, I agree on the interprovincial piece, but again, we have to look at Canada feeding the world. We have a tremendous opportunity on that. On programming specifically, again, it's going to depend commodity by commodity, depending on where the impacts and where we go. This is a very chaotic period in terms of not knowing what's going to happen from day to day, what the U.S. administration may come up with next. So we're going to take it day by day. We'll work shoulder to shoulder with farmers and just know that trade is an absolute priority for this government. And as you mentioned, we've moved the needle already up to $99 billion per year, every year on agri-food exports.
Dr. Rodriguez?
Yes, and we already talked about, I think everybody here agrees about the strengthening interprovincial trade, eliminating these barriers and access the potential of the domestic market, and this is a priority for us, for the Greens. I think that we need to diversify trade, and everybody talks about diversification, both in our international trade and our partners and the products that we export, and also internally, domestically within Canada. But in addition to expanding and diversifying and doing all these wonderful things, I think that it's very important that we support what is already working. And we, as the Greens, we very strongly support our supply management systems and would oppose any initiative to keep eroding it through trade negotiations, because this is working already. And look what is happening. I was talking with some friends the other day and say, well, you know, in trade, our problem is we've become complacent and we put all our eggs, or too many of our eggs, in the basket of the United States because it's so easy with CUSMA, NAFTA, et cetera. And I was saying, well, you know, one thing that we didn't put in their basket is the eggs, because the eggs, we are eating them ourselves, and that's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. So yes, we need diversification of markets, deal with interprovincial trade barriers, diversify inside and outside, and protect our system that we have that are working.
Yes, thank you. I think there's two responses I'll give to this. And the first is we need to rebuild our relationships with some of our most trusted trading partners. I think if COVID taught us anything, I would hope that we had learned that you cannot trust the bad actors around the world. And we're certainly seeing that with the actions that China is taking on Canadian canola and seafood and pork. We have not been able to move Canadian beef into the United Kingdom for a number of years. Unfortunately, the current government has eroded our reputation as a trusted trading partner around the world. We certainly lost almost $4 billion in a market of our peas and lentils to India. As I mentioned, the United Kingdom. These are relationships that a Conservative government will work extremely hard to rebuild and once again show our partners that we are a trusted and reliable trading partner. The second part of that, I think, is focusing on infrastructure in Canada. Again, if you want to have these markets around the world, and I think the President of the United States has given us this window of opportunity that we now realize that we have to diversify those markets. But if we want to access those markets, we have to get our product to Tidewater. And that's why the Conservative Party has put two strong policies forward. One is an energy utility corridor, where we will be able to build pipelines, build additional rail lines, move that oil off of rail, move it to pipelines, put more grain and more commodities on rail to get it moving. Certainly shovel-ready zones, again, to attract that investment here to Canada, to build additional processing, so we're doing that value added here at home, and access and grow our ports. And you know, just one example with the current government now filling in the slips at the Halifax grain elevator, which is the last grain elevator on the East Coast. That seems to be taking a big step backwards when we need to be improving our ports and improving our infrastructure to access those international markets. To be shutting down critical pieces of infrastructure at this critical time is not the path that we need to go. We need to be growing those opportunities, not shutting them down.
Mr. Perron?
Merci beaucoup. Écoutez,
when we talk about foreign markets, there are two aspects to open these markets. To use them, the agreements that we have already, the union would, how come do we accept, we've been accepting several years, that European products have access to our market and not conversely? And Canada should grow a spine and to step forward. Europe is a huge market. We have to step in there. Asia Pacific, I alluded to this earlier. There's a lot of people to feed there. Let's be courageous and go there also. And in these markets, we should also consider that the foreign producers are supported way more than ours are. And this ridiculously more supported. The Farm Bill, this is money when people pretend that the milk is cheaper in the States. When people go get it at the grocery, they've already paid it in their taxes. So this one example amongst others, when I talk about reciprocity of the standards, it's the phytosanitary that was used in the culture, are we giving access to material that was subsidized? And when we tell our producers that they should be competitive, that's where we should be more serious. We should start buying locally. How come there's no an equivalent to the Buy American Act, Buy Canadian Act? We could do this to encourage our institutions. They should prioritize the purchase of local products. This is essential. We were talking about resources, and CFIA, and also the PMRA, and Mr. Lloyd, the Bloc board. We have an interesting platform that he should consult.
Tariff wars have been making people feel differently. And farmers are not alone in that. There's a need, there's a thirst now for Canada, in Canada, Canada-made, Canada-purchased products, and I think that's great. I think we need to lean into this, and it's creating opportunities. It's creating opportunities for small farmers who are new and getting started to connect with buyers in their local economy, and then it's creating opportunities in these larger economy scales. What we need to make sure that we're doing is not, again, being reactionary, and that we are keeping things smooth and calm through the turmoil so that farmers are impacted as least as possible, so they're consistent and they're stable. New Democrats, we're not afraid to stand up to billionaires. We're not afraid to make sure that the markets are diversified and that we're putting Canada first for a change. So of course, we do support interprovincial trade barriers being removed, but we also really want to see more investment. The last time Donald Trump was in office, the Liberals traded away protections for Canadian farmers, costing Canadian dairy farmers over $1.3 billion a year. Nearly half the Conservative caucus voted against protecting supply management in trade negotiations. You know what's Canadian? You know what is the most Canadian thing we can do? Supply management, made in Canada for Canada solution that we need to maintain. I'm also really seeing this talk of infrastructure, and I agree, we need to put some money and invest in infrastructure. We need to expand sales to overseas markets, like expanding capacity at the Port of Churchill. We also need to invest in infrastructure right here at home for high-speed broadband and telephone service. You know, we have these farmers that can't even get a cell phone reception, let alone participate in global market trading. And we also want to see food labeling and traceability rules so Canadians know and trust they're buying Canadian.
It's time for the open part of this debate.
Shaun,
Mr. Boyce, I'm going to you first because Mr. Perron said that Canada needs to grow a spine. I think he was talking about the Liberal Party or the Liberal government. What do you have to say to that?
Peut-être la Fédération en général parce qu'il est insolvertiste, mais
First of all, I agree with Heather. The importance of protecting the supply management. The first time that Lorsqu'il
mentioned supply management on the campaign. The last thing I want to address is John's comment on Halifax. That is a Crown agency. It's not the government. I've already had conversations. My message to folks at home, is that we're not going to fill in the grain terminal piece. No, we're not. And it's a difference between, we will, in 13 days.
Tout le monde a l'air d'accord avec la gestion d'offres. Un matin, je trouve ça...
seems to be agree with supply management, Mr. Blois, in the first week of your government that they would come back with the act that we offer the privilege to put this on the fast track to have it adopted before starting negotiations. Do you agree with this? The Prime Minister was very clear last night with the opportunity to make this undertaking. Do you agree with the act? You will support this? Absolutely.
Market
Oui, ça
access,
fait partie de ça.
And no one mentioned boots on the ground and committing to boots on the ground in some of these markets.
I
I'll
think you did.
let Mr. Barlow go first, and I'll let Blois respond.
Yeah, I think that's critically important to have people who understand agriculture in those embassies and in those consuls, that you are where the business is, to ensure that we are selling the Canadian product. I think the reputation of Canadian products is still extremely high, but we need people there to sell it. But just really quickly, I want to agree with Ms. Ray, who said something I think we should really be thinking about is it's time to put Canada first for a change. I couldn't agree more.
So look,
And
just
very
quickly,
quickly,
if I could, Maria, just very quickly on the point that you're raising, Shaun, if you go back and look at the tape, you might be able to buy me a steak dinner. I think I did say boots on the ground with CFA personnel, exactly what Mr. Barlow is saying. That is a priority for us. Sorry, Marie.
And very quickly, this is one time I'm going to agree with John here, and we need to invest in an east-west infrastructure. The only difference of opinion we have is the part about the oil. Okay, so we do need rails, we need roads, we need energy transmission, we need all that kind of things.
How do you build those, Maria?
Okay, so we're up against
What are we
the
building?
break here, but
Transition, yeah.
we're up against the break here. But I have to ask each of you very quickly. Everybody has mentioned protecting supply management. Ms. Ray brought it up. Does that mean that we protect supply management in the face of and disregard other trade agreements and throw them out if we have to take that stand? Ms. Rodriguez first, yes or no?
No. Well, it doesn't mean that, it means that we protect supply management, but we're not throwing anything out. I don't understand the question.
What if we don't have a agreement with the Australians through the CPTPP and because we have to protect supply management or the renegotiation with the Americans? Mr. Barlow.
There are other things that we can negotiate on.
Mr. Barlow?
Yeah, we've had an incredible record as Conservatives. We've signed free trade agreements with more than 40 countries, and we were always in partnership with supply management and protected supply management, which is different than the Liberals who sold supply management on Kuzma, where they no longer can trade Class 6 and 7 skim milk products.
Mr. Perron?
Du tout à fait possible.
It's absolutely possible to sell free trade agreements without sacrificing supply management. It's been done before, so we can do that. And we can't divide agriculture. We have to stop doing that. It's not a competition. It's complementary. These things are complementary. And supply management is an advantage to all other production. It creates stability in Quebec and Canada and elsewhere. That's what we have to keep in mind. And I invite people to read up on it. Ms. Ray?
I believe that the supply management should be protected through trade negotiations. I think there's, like Ms. Rodriguez says, there's lots of other things we can be negotiating on. And so undercutting our agricultural sector through supply management tools isn't silly. I grew up beef farming. We're not part of a supply management group. But you know who helped keep the local economy of farmers going? Those who were protected under a supply management agreement.
Thank you.
Shaun, we can do both. Obviously, my priority is not only to protect supply-managed farmers, but also to support the exporting commodities as well. I want to differ from Mr. Barlow. He may forget that the Conservatives openly negotiated away during CETA. We were under real duress. We made sure compensation was there. Glad to hear the Conservatives finally talking about supply management 75% of the way into this campaign.
It is now time for a quick break and a word from our sponsor, Food, Health and Consumer Products of Canada. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Michael Graydon, CEO of Food, Health and Consumer Products of Canada. Our members are proud to be the essential link between Canadian farms and Canadian families, purchasing over 40% of Canada's agricultural output to process right here at home. But right now the system is under pressure. Families are feeling the pinch from rising prices. Freight costs are soaring, shipping routes are unreliable, and critical ingredients are harder to source. And international trade disputes are exposing how vulnerable we have become. That's why we're calling for a bold reset, one that puts Canadian production first, lowers costs for families, and gives our makers the tools to thrive. And it starts with 3 practical steps. First, champion affordability by eliminating taxes and policies that drive up the cost of everyday goods. Second, cut red tape by removing outdated rules that slow down innovation and bury businesses in unnecessary costs. And third, boost domestic production by attracting investment, ending interprovincial trade barriers, and making it easier to expand here at home. This isn't pie in the sky thinking. It's what Canadians told us they want. More local jobs, fewer supply chain shocks, and a self-reliant economy that keeps shelves stocked, no matter what the world throws at us. With the right support, Canada can become a global powerhouse in agri-food processing, creating jobs, adding value to what we grow, and strengthening food security. We're ready to partner with any government that's serious about making that happen by prioritizing Canadian production in every policy decision. This federal election, let's give Canada's agri-food sector the competitive edge it deserves, the tools it needs to grow, and the confidence to do it right here at home. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the agricultural leaders debate.
Bonsoir, nous...
Good evening. Our last part of the debate will begin with a series of questions. This one's an economic one. Coming back to trade, ongoing U.S. tariffs and tariff threats have created a highly uncertain trade environment on the eve of a CUSMA review. With the upcoming review of CUSMA in 2026, what are your top priorities for renegotiating agricultural trade terms with the U.S., and how will you ensure all Canadian farmers benefit from any of these revisions? Ms. Rodriguez? Oh, again.
Up for review, that's the question, right? Maybe I didn't realize I was first. And what would be our priorities? I think we already talked about a little bit about that before, that protecting supply management is important. But at the same time, you know, the problem now is that trade agreements are only as good as the countries who sign the agreement being willing to respect it, right? And if you have a wonderful trade agreement, but the parties are not respecting the trade agreement, then you have a problem. So our system of trade rules, it's suffering from this uncertainty that we're having right now because there are players who are not respecting the rules. So for agriculture, what's important? For agriculture, it's important, again, to be able to have ambitious trade agreements where we can liberalize trade, but not in a way that we don't protect our own domestic industries. We have to have the protections to our domestic industry. So that in agriculture is a crucial thing that has always been discussed in trade agreements. And it's one of the most difficult negotiations are always around agriculture. I participated in 3 of these things because at some point the Harper government was doing a lot with Latin America, had Panama, Colombia, Peru. And you have to respect the interests of your trading partner, but what if your trading partner is much bigger and it doesn't respect yours? So this is agriculture, it's critical. We have to protect the interests of our industries and that, and make sure that we are not.
Merci.
Yeah, sorry.
Monsieur Barlow.
Yes.
Merci. We have to address from a position of strength. And certainly our leader, Pierre Poilievre, and the Conservative Party are the leader who will do that and show strength with our counterparts in the United States. And that's why we've committed to expedite a review of the CUSMA agreement with the United States and Mexico. We need to find out what exactly each party wants and needs from that. For myself, when it comes to agriculture, my focus of that will be to ensure that country of origin labeling is taken off the table. This has been a continuous threat from multiple administrations south of the border. Our cattle industry is so integrated with the United States. Animals, live and processed, are moving across that border multiple times. Some assurances that Proposition 12 will not impact Canadian pork producers specifically and our ability to access the American market. It is my understanding that there is some moves within the Farm Bill that will protect Canadian producers from the elements of Proposition 12 and animal husbandry. I think that's critical. But we will also assure the Americans that we will remove trade irritants like front-of-pack labeling, like the 2P plastics ban, which the Americans have said are trade irritants, which make our processors and value added here extremely expensive, an additional $14 billion in costs to the industry. But I think the important part is that will drive up fresh food prices almost 34%. Because the Americans will no longer be wanting to access the Canadian market to meet those new regulations. We will also assure the Americans and our Mexican partners that we will not have a carbon border adjustment, which again will drive up food costs even higher. And when you see the report that came out 2 days ago that Canada has the highest food inflation in 50 years, the highest in the OECD, that tells you that the Liberal policies and regulations are making food unaffordable, and that is impacting our farmers.
Merci. Monsieur Perron.
Merci beaucoup. Bon.
Thank you very much. It was said a few times during the campaign that nobody can control the American president, but we can stand up to a bully, and so we have to have clear conditions. We talked a lot about supply management today, and ironically in other points, but now we have to talk about laws. This is something that the American president will understand. We get to negotiation tables and we say, it's not in our mandate. They say that a lot, it's not in our mandate. At the Bloc Québécois, we heard Pierre-Marc Johnson, a negotiator, who talked about how things function at the table. Not a whole lot of people have been around the table, and so we have to understand how it works. We need clear conditions, and it's a right. It respects the things that are protected. The U.S. protects things. We need to do the same thing, including supply management. Now, with reciprocity, I talked a lot about that today. Yes, we want to have a free trade agreement. We want our farmers who export have access to markets, but in conditions that are equitable, under equitable conditions. So if there are grants in the South, we have to be consistent. Over the transition period, there might be a period of difficulty where exports may be blocked. As a state, we need to support our population with cash flows. And in agriculture, there's already a lot of debt. Cash flow needs to be a direct subsidy. We have salary subsidies as well to help companies absorb any shocks if ever there's a reduction in production. That's important. At the long term, it'll be positive. It'll allow us to diversify our markets. It'll also encourage us to think about other additional processing that we can do locally rather than sending our raw materials away. We talk about metals. We can do that with grains as well. We can innovate.
Canadian farmers, especially family farms, are at the front lines, and we need Canadian agricultural workforces at the table. We need the labor market at the table when we talk about trade and negotiations. John brought up the fact that we need to have farmers making decisions, and unfortunately, our farmer numbers are dwindling. We don't have the farmers that we used to have. Family farms are being swallowed up by conglomerates, and we're now having this change of what's a farmer and what policy fits that farmer. And when it comes to trading, we need to make sure that we're putting ourselves first so that we can get through it for the long haul. I do think there's opportunity here. I do think that when you look across the country, people want us to have Canadian solutions, things built in Canada, sold in Canada. That's, I don't think, going to change. And so this is an opportunity to lean into that. But as we work through those opportunities and grow and change, we need to make sure that we have some stability on the ground. So the New Democrats want to do things outside of agricultural policy, like EI, for example. New Democrats want to make sure that small businesses, so self-earners, can qualify for EI. So farmers, for example, could now qualify for systems to help them. We also want to make sure that we introduce a payment protection program for produce growers and take immediate steps to restore protection for growers selling in the United States. Small things that we can do to make sure people stay safe while we negotiate and while we talk. And while we negotiate and talk, we need to make sure that we're being firm and saying, you know what, Canada has something to offer, and we're not going to just throw away our values. We're not going to throw away our future soil and our future farmers on the land for a one-time quick now benefit as opposed to a long-term benefit. We need to make sure that we're creating a pan-Canadian food strategy that allows us to be a leader and gives us more leverage.
Merci. Monsieur Blois.
Martin, les exportations canadiennes.
Martin, Canadian exports to the U.S. represent 60% of our agricultural exports here in Canada, so the relationship with the U.S. is crucial. Obviously, the situation right now is very challenging with Mr. Trump and the American administration, but I believe that Mr. Carney is asking that our country get more respect before any negotiations, before any conversations around the economic relations.
I would slightly disagree with Mr. Barlow, of course, on Mr. Poilievre. Premier Smith has been very clear that Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Trump are quote-unquote in sync. I don't know if that should give a whole lot of comfort to Canadians tonight, given the way that Mr. Trump has handled our relationship in what has been a really chaotic manner. We will be there to protect supply management, absolutely. That is a priority. I have the most supply managed farms east of Quebec in my riding. I know how important it is. But I also think it's not only defending, but promoting. I think we have a tremendous opportunity on hatching ag resiliency. We are a little bit vulnerable on the amount of imports that come into the United States. That could be a priority for us to work on building up the genetics here. I think regulatory cooperation. Again, I would highlight the Americans, certainly on their science, are a trusted jurisdiction alongside other countries. How do we work in that space? But I also think it's important on relationships. Again, if I'm the guy still in this role in 12 days, 13 days, it'll be a quick call out to Secretary Rollins. It'll be a conversation with Senator Bozeman, G.T. Thompson. These are the Republicans in Congress and certainly within the administration that we have to have a strong relationship with. I would agree about cool in terms of what John mentioned. That would be a priority for our government to engage. Hear him on Prop 12. That is being something that's addressed in the Farm Bill, which is absolutely critical. And again, I think aligning the regulations around the biofuel market. We have tremendous opportunity. Again, I'm very concerned that the Conservatives want to cut the clean fuel standard. At the moment, we should be accelerating our biofuel sector, but those are some of the priorities. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Maintenant, c'est la question ouverte. J'aimerais...
It's open question time. I have heard political parties accuse one and the other of, not enough pressure on the senator who should have made supply management acts in place. Who did not apply enough pressure? I can start, Mr. Ménard. It's the two big parties, because we've had systematic blocking of senators appointed by Trudeau and the Liberals. We can also say that they are independent, but when they are final or former advisors, that's not the case. That was the big difference. And the Conservatives as well also blocked the Senate. Listen, we want to have a strong government on supply management. Carney has been clear, it's off the table. The Conservatives, however, with regards to the bill, were very weak in the House. We are open to discussions around bills, but again, it's very important to elect and make sure that people are strong around supply management.
In perspective of supply management, let's go back to the initial CUSMA agreement where the Liberals gave up the ability for Canadian supply managed farms to trade Class 6 and 7 skim milk powder. That was a loss where the Liberals threw them under the bus. And then Canadian dairy farmers begged the Liberal government that time, do not implement the new quota access until the end of the dairy calendar on August 1st. They were told, the dairy farmers were told that would not happen. Well, they lied to them. They implemented that months in advance before the end of the dairy calendar, giving the Americans months of quota-free access to the Canadian market. The Conservative government, in numerous trade agreements before that, always worked side by side with Canadian supply managed farmers. We came to agreements by ensuring that they were at the table with us, having those discussions and sharing the agreements that we had. We made sure that whatever agreement was there, they were a part of that discussion. We will continue to do that moving forward.
Tout ce qui s'est dit est relativement avec.
Everything that was said is relatively true, but both parties, I'm telling you, if there's only the bloc that brought, that defended, and we were generous to offer our advice to, could you talk about the link between the production of canola, soy, of beef, pork that could be at a disadvantage if we dilute the supply management? Nous, en présumant que c'est bien que notre commerce avec les Américains, c'est tellement bête parfois.
Over years, it has served some purposes, it has helped people, and we do have to take a strong, but what's wrong here is that we are pretty much assuming that this is okay, that we are so dependent on this particular trading partner, and we have seen that it's perhaps not such a good idea.
Merci. Maintenant, nous tombons sur la 7e question.
Question number 7 now. What is your plan to help farmers adopt sustainable practices while ensuring they remain competitive, given international focus that's increasingly looking at agriculture to reduce GHG emissions, improve biodiversity, and address water quality, just to name a few environmental focal points? So what do you see that can increase biodiversity without hampering trade? Mr. Barlow?
A little bit backwards. I think what we should be saying is, how do we highlight the work that Canadian farmers have already done? And how do we give them credit for the incredible advancements they've made? And I want to give you a couple of examples of that. A study was done by the Global Institute of Food Security about 6 or 8 months ago, and it came out with some incredible stats of the ability of Canadian agriculture. So, for example, a ton of wheat grown in Canada can go around the world 3 times in a train load before it has the same carbon footprint as wheat grown in Europe. A ton of canola grown in Saskatchewan, the carbon footprint of that canola is 67% lower than canola grown anywhere else in the world. So if you take a look at, on average, in a different country, emissions from agriculture are around 20-25%. In Canada, we're 8%. So we are a third of the carbon emissions of any other country when it comes to Canadian agriculture. So that shows you the incredible innovation and the incredible practices that we've adopted here in Canada, whether that's precision agriculture, minimal till, 4R nutrient stewardship, the machinery that we build here in Canada, whether that's an air seeder or crop protection products. We will be happy to export that knowledge and that equipment around the world to help them get to where we already are. We're 70% more efficient in fertilizer use than any other country on the planet. So why are we continuing to look at Canadian agriculture as part of the problem instead of looking at Canadian agriculture as part of the solution? And a Conservative government wants to elevate that and leverage that success story and share that with the world. We don't want to continue to punish them with carbon taxes and regulations. We want to be a partner to Canadian agriculture. We will always be better. There's always room to be better, but let's be partners in doing that.
Monsieur Perron.
Oui, merci. Il y a quelque chose de...
There's something true. The we've already done, but we can do even more. But we have to recognize what was done, and we should concretely contribute to any environmental improvement. We can calculate the quality of the soil, the carbon, the measures. We can encourage the players. We have to do it in a decentralized way. Very often, Mr. Ménard, with environmental programs, we have Prime Minister will make an announcement at a press conference, and people are not ready. The delay's too short, and there's no money available when they do ask for. For a shoreline, we'll give 5 years of what we can't pay you for life. This is public funds, but we can recognize the efforts you've done to protect the shorelines. This could be used for the next innovation, but the best to know what can they do on their lands. It's not up to us five. It's the people who are there in the field harvesting. And I talked about risk management. We cannot let the producers to shoulder all the climate change crisis that we're facing. So we can become more efficient when we talk about herbicides and pesticides, not to be dogmatic and to remove all these, all the 3 R's, to use the right quantity at the right time, and before withdrawing a product in a mandatory way. Have we measured all the impacts? It will be true for pesticides. It could be true for plastics in some use. So we need intelligent policy, and we need a strong opposition that comes with real propositions and adults in the room, and that's us.
New Democrats know that Canadian farmers are going above and beyond to be good stewards for our soil, air, and water. I see that all the time. I see farmers really connected with the land. When you talk to them, they know exactly when there's a new species on their property. They know exactly how long something's been there. They know that water level, and they know when it goes down, and they know when it's going up. No one knows their land better than our Canadian farmers. And we need to listen to them, and we need to make sure that we're not sacrificing them because we can't make action happen now. Underserved communities, farmers, these are who are going to be hit the most by the climate crisis. These are our vulnerable sectors. We need to protect farmers for the future. And yes, it may mean that we have to do investments now so that we can switch off our dependency on oil and gas in our agricultural sector, but it's an important thing to do, and it's an important thing for our future. Canadian farmers, especially family farms, are on the front line of this climate crisis. And so the New Democrats want to support the work that Canadian farmers are already doing by implementing sustainable practices. We'll implement a national soil health strategy in partnership with farmers and our climate change plan to put farmers first so Canadians can keep feeding Canada. I think it's really important that we introduce investments in food labeling. We invest in ensuring that the future of our farms are bright and flourishing. What's not going to do that, what's really difficult to grow a crop with, is water that is filled with bitumen through a pipeline. That is very, very difficult, and bitumen does not belong in a pipeline. Farmers care about our land. We care about our water. We want to see our future generations farm on that land, and so we need to make sure that we're doing what we can now to put farmers first so that land is still there. Protect it from being bought up by foreign investors. We're losing 319 acres in Ontario a day. That is too much, and we need to protect our farmland, put that water first, put that soil first, and put those farmers first.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Blois.
Martin, je suis d'accord avec...
I agree with Mr. Barlow regarding the sustainability of our Canadian agriculture and to security, the food security but it's possible to continue this work hand in hand with the industry. We can work jointly, and it's the main difference between the Conservatives and us. We can continue with real programs to help our farmers to renew
in terms of those opportunities. We have an accelerated cost capital allowance that has been allowed for innovation on farm that we've continued. I think that's an extremely important program. Our capital gains policy is back to 50% under Mr. Carney. It was the right policy. He makes the right decision to go back. But we've also kept the lifetime capital lifetime capital gains exemption up to $1.25 million. That's really important for farmers. It's important for intergenerational transfer as well. We are proposing to invest $30 million in the Clean Agricultural Technology Fund. Again, that's a concrete promise that we've put out. That's a good start. That builds upon some of the programming that I mentioned earlier, $1 billion of on-farm initiatives, whether it's the on-farm climate action program, whether or not it's been programs to help support farmers who are protecting wetlands. We have a lot to say on this, and I think under my leadership and under leadership of Mr. Carney, we are going to be very concrete about making sure that those measures are there, but to work directly with farmers to make sure that the cost competitiveness question is absolutely paramount in all of this. Last thing I would say is around industrial pricing. Mr. Barlow talks as though the carbon price still applies on Canadian farmers. He wants to live back. I'm looking where we're going in terms of the future. He wants to cut the industrial price that actually could be used as a way to reward the ecological services that farmers are doing. He wants to actually have a program that would use more taxpayers' dollars. John, how much taxpayers' dollars would Canadian farmers have to pay under the Conservative plan to use more ITCs instead of the small C Conservative plan industrially and on top of the clean fuel standards that they're cutting?
Merci. Madame Rodriguez.
Yeah, I think all my colleagues already have said something that is that Canadian farmers are at the front line of sustainability, and the proof is that there has been some more policy support in recent years for these kind of initiatives, and the moment you have these programs, the farmers embrace it. So the farming community really wants to embrace these programs. But the programming to support farming that is based on ecological principles is still relatively limited. It's a matter of the balance. And the bulk of the program dollars that our agriculture policy delivers still are going to prop up a model of agriculture that is very, very highly dependent on external inputs and fossil fuels. So the vision of the Green Party is that we need to shift the incentives to level the playing field. Yes, there are many good programs, and the farmers have adopted, and farmers embrace them, but we need to do even more. And in agriculture, there's three things: climate change mitigation, adaptation, and the protection of biodiversity in our agricultural landscapes. They're not competing goals. They work together. So getting more farming programming that contribute to put these things together, it's important, and we need more of it. And farmers will absolutely embrace it. We're sure of that, and that's in the Green Party platform that we need to do more in that area.
Merci beaucoup. Nous voici maintenant à la porte.
Now we're at the portion, and I'd like to suggest to you, if farmers are listening to us, the scheme, but concrete steps. Can you bring about steps to facilitate the sustainable practices? I think it's very concrete that recognize that the sacrifices that some producers can do for the environment, it has to be taken into account collectively. Everybody gains on this field.
Talked about.
On en a parlé quand on a parlé d'intendance, pas de labourage, etc. On veut que les producteurs continuent à entreprendre ces nouvelles innovations, et on a besoin de décisions dans la science et pas dans la politique. M. Boyce a dit les agriculteurs ne payent pas la taxe carbone. Ben, ils l'ont mis en attente. On parle d'une taxe carbone industrielle. Ça, c'est également le membre qui ne savait pas que CN et CFA transmettaient des impôts aux producteurs. Les producteurs vont toujours payer sur l'alimentation animale,
Mr. Carney doesn't believe that anybody buys steel. I'd ask him what they make a combine out of, or an air seeder, or a till. What do they make those things out of? Steel.
I would ask Mr. Barlow what their environmental agenda, if any, at all, because what Mr. Poilievre has talked about is actually spending more taxpayers' dollars to reduce emissions. So, yeah, Mr. Barlow can talk about removing an industrial price, but how much of our taxpayers' dollars, including farmers' taxpayers' dollars, are going to have to be used to go that route, which economists actually say is the least inefficient way to do it. Now, farmers are not going to be paying directly on the consumer price. Mr. Carney made the right decision. I'm a member of Parliament on this, and he wants to take you back instead of where we're going. A Liberal Party under Mr. Carney is going to be absolutely there. He throws out this idea that it's only paused, it's not going to get rid of it. That was the tool that we had, John, without Parliament setting it. The first piece of legislation, the first piece of legislation from the Liberal government, a majority-elected Liberal government, will actually remove the consumer carbon price altogether. That is our firm, absolute commitment. And what is your plan? And at the end of the day, if I can finish, I want to finish on this. Clean fuel standards at a time that Western farmers in particular need that support on the demand drivers, you guys are going to cut it. On the time that we could use the industrial price and open up the opportunity for big oil companies to actually reward farmers to actually account for reduction of emission, you want to cut that as well. And then also you want to use more taxpayers' dollars from farmers and everyday Canadians on some respectfully sham program that you're not actually serious on the environmental question whatsoever.
You're just making stuff up. The clean fuel standard is the second carbon tax, the most complicated piece of legislation ever written.
The canola guys like it, John.
And we will have a biofuels program. Pierre Poilievre has been very clear on a biofuels program.
I think what we can really agree on is that what is going to cost farmers a lot of money, what's going to be very expensive, is climate change. And they're going to be the first ones that are going to see decreased yield, and not even a decrease in yield. The nutrition in the food that we are growing is on a decline. These are not things that we can just freeze in policy. These are things that are going to continue to happen as we have these conversations, and we can't fight over whether it's real or not. Climate change is real. It's impacting us. We see it every day. We're not being provided more money because we have to, on the ground, as a producer, pull in more water.
Too bad that we run out of time, because this is connected to the business risk management question. And we should have made the connection with our discussion on business risk management, and we did not.
You can address it in your closing remarks at the end. I encourage you to do so. It's time for question 8, okay? And Mr. Perron, I'm going to start with you on this. Canadian food processors currently purchase approximately 40% of Canada's agricultural products, while Canada continues to export many agricultural products as raw commodities. Meanwhile, the ongoing uncertainty around the global trade has brought greater focus to the resilience and diversification of Canadian supply chains. Does your party see increased capacity for domestic food processing as a priority to add greater value to Canada's agricultural production and to diversify agricultural markets? And if so, what plans does your party have to increase Canada's capacity to strengthen Canada's food and beverage manufacturing sector?
Absolument. Absolument, Monsieur Haney.
Absolutely. It's very important, and in fact, we have been putting forward this idea that we have an innovation credit when we modify and modernize processing companies. We don't talk about agri-food enough. All that we produce on farms needs to be processed, and our companies are very efficient. They are small, but there's some bigger ones as well, and they need flexibility. And so to have financial leverage to update them is one thing. When you say that we process 40%, that's good, but we can't stop that as well. I'll talk about counter tariffs, right? We talked about what's going on now. We have put a counter tariff on aluminum cans, but we don't make enough aluminum cans, and so we import, and so we've just shot ourselves in the foot. We have to be careful. We have to create an exception for that industry, and on the long term, we have to say, well, why are we not making enough cans? We are aluminum producers. Something doesn't work there. So when we talk about secondary processing for food, there are sectors that are adjacent that will become very important. And these companies need labor. I mentioned it earlier. Foreign workers, the government had brought that down to 20 in agro-food, and the previous minister talked about bringing that down to 10. We have to fight. It makes no sense. And the industry was saying, okay, well, we have to at least stay at 20. Well, we have to put that up to 30%. I don't know if you've ever been in an agro-food processing plant, but labor is the same thing that we see on our farms. Approximately 7% of Canadians and Quebecers could eventually imagine to work in agro-food. That's not a whole lot of people. So at some point, we have to be serious and give people the conditions required so that they can develop their industry. And to do that, we need to give them flexibility as well. So we are there for them. Ms. Ray?
New Democrats will cut regulations to help Canadian farmers and producers, but ensure public services that protect Canadians' health remain intact. It's really about being delicate and decisive about which regulations make sense and which ones are just there to make more money for those that have enough. There has been a loss of small and medium-scale food processors in Canada, particularly abattoirs. And this is really, again, where we're seeing that difference between a small to medium-sized corporate farm and like a big conglomerate corporate farm, where they have access to their own food processing facilities. Public facilities are dwindling. There's no mobile ag stations anymore. It's difficult to find what you need to access kind of the food processing industry. And so, you know, Canadian farmers are paying too much to ship their livestock or can't ship their livestock at all because there's just not enough spaces. We have sections in East Central Ontario that have no access to an abattoir at all and have to go communities outside of their farm in order to find access to processing. It costs a lot, and those small farmers are not being compensated for having to go out of their way because the infrastructure isn't there for them. It's almost like it's been set up that way. The New Democrats will always fight back against corporate greed. We will cut regulations that benefit large corporations and hurt farmers and small, medium-sized producers, while defending policies that keep our food safe and ensuring the highest quality standards from farm to table.
Mr. Blois?
Absolute priority for us, and the fact of the matter is we actually have a platform commitment around a $200 million domestic innovation fund on agri-food. I live in a part of the country that is a regional economy that has seen some level of deindustrialization in our agri-food processing. We still have critical pieces like Eden Valley. We have our federal plant in Charlottetown or in Prince Edward Island. But this is an absolute critical question about what we do more to support our agri-food processors. And again, we are, I believe, unless I haven't read the block platform, the only party that has actually explicitly mentioned we have a firm commitment in this space. If I'm still the minister again in 12 days, my focus will actually be how we can catalyze other types of private investment around the world. It would be convening some of our leaders and our CEOs in those spaces to say what is it that we can do to help drive innovation in that space, see more investment. We trail the United States and Europe in this question, Shaun, as you know, but I think there's a good model in terms of venture capital. The Netherlands has a great example where they encourage companies to actually domicile their management company in that country and then provide about a 10 cent for every $10 of private investment capital, $1 of public, if it's happening in the country. Those are examples that I would want to work on. There's never going to be enough public money to solve this question. It has to be catalyzing private investment. Specified risk material, huge priority for us. The science takes time. One of the things that I sat down with the Canadian Cattle Association just before the dissolution of Parliament, we're concurrently drafting regulations right now with CFIA along with the science. We can't get out in front of our skis, but we can definitely be ready to implement the regulatory changes at the moment that the science says. We, I think, can assume that's going to be the case, but there is a due process here. It's not for politicians necessarily to get out in front, but we do have to drive the efficiency on that question. We will, particulièrement au Québec, je comprends.
Quebec. Particularly in Quebec, I understand the importance of labor, specifically in agri-food. We are here to maintain the levels of temporary foreign workers in processing facilities and elsewhere, and also work with the Quebec government to find a support mechanism.
A huge priority for the Green Party and a very important pillar of our platform to expand local and regional food processing to add value, storage and distribution infrastructure, supporting the domestic market. And one thing that Heather mentioned, here is a good example of where regulatory modernization really can do something, okay? Look at the situation in Prince Edward Island where the people, they keep closing federally registered plant in Quebec, and then the hogs from PI had to go further and further and further. And instead of having recognition of the provincial inspection system, so we can at least trade within the Maritimes and strengthen our local abattoirs. And provincially, yes. And why this is being known for so long. This is the kind of regulatory barrier that it's been there forever and everybody complains. And who is benefiting from the current status quo with because there was a whole review and there's the Food Safe for Canadian Act and all of that, and like the government has known this for a very long time. Both conservative and liberal governments are still there. And for us, the Green Party, this strengthening of the infrastructure and the regulations and the things we need to promote and to support the growth domestically for our markets, for our industries, to add value, to not export so much raw stuff and have it processed and the value added here in Canada. It's a huge priority of our platform, and it connects to the regulatory modernization side and also with the business risk management side and with everything. Everything is connected. That's why we Green are ecologically minded.
Thank you. Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, and this is a critically important question and is a key pillar in what we've been talking about bringing it home and bringing that productivity back to Canada. As I said earlier, we are 67th in the OECD in terms of productivity, and that number continues to drop. And typical Liberal solution is to just throw more money at it rather than actually address the root cause of the problem. And I'll give you a great example, which is Vitalis Dairy Processors in Abbotsford, BC, which has been working for a number of years to build a new dairy processor in Abbotsford, which would be a game changer for Western Canadian dairy producers. But it has been almost completely stalled as a result of red tape, with just permitting application after permitting application, layers and layers of red tape. But as Conservatives, we want to have the one permit, one-stop shop where you will have to go through the process one time to get your approvals and your permits to build new processing and new manufacturing and new energy projects in Canada. We are losing investment. We've lost $500 billion of investment in the last 10 years, left Canada, gone to the United States for the most part, because they don't see a clear path to getting permits approved, or even a decision on approval, or a decision on a permit application. So you can throw all the money at it if you want. If you don't deal with the root cause of the problem, and that is giving investors a clear path to getting a decision, then they're not going to come to Canada no matter how much money you throw at them. The second part of that is we want to have boots, not suits. We will provide opportunities for 350,000 new apprentices. So if you're going to have this additional processing and manufacturing in Canada, which I think we all agree is important, you must also have the labor. So we want to train those new apprentices, but also address the temporary foreign worker program and make agriculture its own stream. Unfortunately, I think many Canadians, but certainly the bureaucrats, don't understand the timelines and the necessity of what is needed in agriculture. And this is a national security, food security issue. So we want to have a standalone agriculture labor force process to bring that labor to Canada, that we can not only build these facilities, but also have the labor to operate them.
We're going to get to the open part of the discussion here. Ms. Ray, I'm going to go to you first, give you an opportunity to get in here. You brought up reducing regulations and also talked about abattoirs at the provincial level. Is dropping some of the interprovincial trade barriers on provincial meat inspection, is that one of the regulations you'd like to see go away?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to have more free trade between the provinces. You know, it's when farmers are looking at where am I going to sell my product, and it's so much easier to go in the States than their neighbor next door. You know, that's a problem. Here in Canada, we need to be able to freely trade across our provincial borders.
Okay, Mr. Barlow?
Well, we've proven to be able to do that. And this is maybe one area where I think we would all agree, but during COVID, we eliminated those barriers on meat processing specifically, so that a provincially accredited facility could process beef, pork, and move that interprovincially rather than only Cargill and JBS being able to do that. So we proved we can do it very quickly when we had to. So I don't understand why the Liberal government isn't just making this happen quickly now. It's already worked.
Yeah.
So-
What I don't understand is why, if we always known that this can be done, why we are talking about it after, at least from my perspective, at least 20 years of having this conversation conservative and liberal governments, and it's still not
So Shaun,
being sorted out.
Maria, I think it's important, we're
Quickly,
federal, we're
quickly.
running to be federal members of parliament.
Yeah.
One of us could be the federal minister of agriculture after this is all said and done. It's important to put into context, Shaun, for listeners at home, 95% of the beef produced in this country is produced at a federal standard and inspected plant. I agree about the proposition of being able to reduce those barriers, but we ought to be careful, by the way. Go talk to the Canadian Meat Council, Mr. Barlow, Ms. Maria, about the importance of making sure that we don't compromise our international agreements in terms of our export capacity. It's got to be both ends of the telescope at the same time. I have a lot of provincial abattoir concerns in my home province, but we got to be careful, and we're chasing 5% of the market here, so let's be able to work collaboratively. The provinces have to be at the table. It will be a priority on the other side of this election for us.
I think,
But we're
Mr. Perron,
relating for the
D'accord
international.
sur l'idée de décider les provinces.
Try to do more trade amongst provinces, but we have to be careful to leave place of the jurisdictions have their word. We have to be rational in the slaughterhouses. There's a lack of structure. Regional slaughterhouses as infrastructure, the state should support them, and our salaries support in agri-food. This is essential for the next difficult period that we're about to face. I'd like my colleagues to say what they mean by this.
We're not talking about international trade.
Exactly.
JBS and Cargill will take care of that. So I have spoken to
Shaun,
producers,
we have to make
and the
sure
Meat
we don't
Council
compromise.
understands
There's
if
a
we don't
process
have
here.
local processing, we're not going to be able to grow
John,
this industry.
do both.
Mr. Barlow, what about using science clusters to build domestic processing? Like, we've used Protein Industries Canada and mechanisms like that. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you're picking winners and losers. Some of them are successful, some of them aren't. I think we don't have to go that deep into it. I think, as we proved during COVID, that this system worked by just finding the provinces and the feds to agree on certain standards. Now, that definitely has to happen.
Okay, we're going to get on to question 9, and it's actually our last question. And Ms. Ray, this one will go to you first. So for the final question of today's debate, efficient trade and transportation infrastructure is vital to the Canadian economy, with exports and imports driving over 2/3 of our country's GDP. For more than the U.S., and that's far more than the U.S. or even Australia, which is quite amazing. However, confidence in Canada's trade and transportation infrastructure has plummeted over the past decade, exacerbated by extreme weather, the pandemic, labor shortages and disruptions, global instability, and U.S. nearshoring that is very much underway now. Many fear these disruptions threaten Canada's reputation as a trusted supplier of quality agri-food products. So I'll ask you, how would you ensure that Canadian agriculture has the labor, trade, and transportation infrastructure needed to remain globally competitive?
I think in this situation, the NDP would do what the NDP does best, which is put workers first. And when I talk to farmers, that's what I hear. Like that's the step between being a small farmer and jumping up into a medium-sized farmer is being able to hire, being able to have staff, being able to have a crew around you. And that is so difficult because there's just not enough labor in agriculture. People aren't motivated. There's a lot of work being done to try to motivate more people to join agriculture as a career, as an employment option. And we need to do more of that. We need to have skills trades so that people are confident and know, and we have labor that that farmers can pull from. And all of that also goes back to, what's good for business. At the end of the day, farmers are also business owners. And what's good for business is having a strong fabric. Having labor that is healthy, that can go to the doctor, having more rural infrastructure in terms of transit, so people can actually get to the farms to do the work. These are all really important things in other industries and are equally as important in agriculture, and I think it's often overlooked too much, and we need to prioritize that. I really think that we need to introduce a pan-Canadian food strategy. We need to be smart about this. We need to become a leader in sustainable food production. We need to know what we have to offer, know our strengths, communicate those strengths, and accompany this with public education for something like a clear food labeling and traceability rule. Make sure that people understand where their food comes from. We're losing that. As we lose family farms, we're losing our connection to the land. Canadians are losing their connections to food. People don't know what season something is in should be ripened in. And we need to change that so that people are more connected to where their food comes from, then people are more enticed to buy Canadian, and people are more enticed to stand up with the farmers as well.
Mr. Blois?
Shaun, there's a lot in that question in only 2 minutes, but I want to focus on one area in particular that we have not discussed, which is youth in agriculture and getting more new entrants in. I'm the youngest Canadian agriculture minister in the history of this country, and it's going to be a priority and a focus for me if I'm still in this role again in 12 days. What we are committing to as a party is actually an increase of the guarantee from the government under the Canadian Agricultural Loans Act. Right now it's at $500,000. We're increasing that up to $1 million and increasing the terms from 5 years up to 10 years. That's an important measure because, of course, the financial institutions will actually build their benchmarking in terms of what they provide for loan access on CALA. It hasn't been upgraded in 20 years. We're committing to doing that. But I also think there has to be a bigger national working group on a sit down with the banks, with FCC, provinces and territories to figure out some type of financial mechanism that we can help smooth the transaction because, of course, the cost of capital to get involved in farming has become higher. The land that is required is significant on economies of scale. And, of course, the question around land and availability is one that's particularly important at the provincial level. We see in Ontario 320 acres of farmland every year.
I want to hear about trade infrastructure.
But I want to talk about this, Shaun, because it's important. If we don't have those new entrants, it matters. On trade infrastructure, what I would say is we've committed to a $5 billion fund to be able to build with our ports and our exporting capacity in this country. On interswitching, I've had constructive conversations with Minister Freeland. Obviously, I think that pilot should be extended. I think the one calculation, given the dynamic with Canada-US, is that we may not be able to have the American Railroad have access. Labor groups in this country are concerned, particularly on the railroads, but interswitching would be a priority. We ran out of runway. Obviously, the pilot requires legislative change. That could be something we move on quickly. And the other piece I would say on regulation, one of the things we're going to do, again, if it's still me, the guy you're talking to in 12 days, is we're going to take a look at our entire regulatory regime that is under our purview and say what we can do to put an economic lens. That would include transportation, by the way. Those are the things that we need to do constructively to help drive trade and logistics in this country.
Thank you. Dr. Rodriguez?
Yeah. So the question was about trade infrastructure, and of course, international infrastructure to allow our product to exit for international trade is important, but we're talking earlier about how the Green Party gives a lot of priority to strengthening the domestic market, and this is another big pillar in our platform, which is investing in east-west infrastructure, things that connect us across the country, including rails, including roads, including energy transmission. And that in itself is not going to do the job if the rural communities don't have infrastructure and the people who work in the system don't have infrastructure. So what can we do about infrastructure? Well, we need to invest. This is one of the key areas where the public sector investment, it's the way to go, and we need to provide rural communities with the resources they need so people can move, so people can transport themselves, right? And the connection across the country. And this is an area where Canada has not invested enough. The rail, just a barrier for so many things. So we need to do a lot more in that area. And I was not sure if your question included labor, because some of my colleagues were talking about labor. But that's got to do with infrastructure, because you have to take the people where the work is. And having access to consistent, reliable workforce is super important. It's vital for the sector. So we need to just review all these programs that allow for seasonal workers, temporary foreign workers, or seasonal workers all the time, but also the part that the Green Party is very strong is in the education. We are advocating for free tuition for young people so they can access agriculture careers and work in this sector and grow our sector.
Your turn, Mr. Barlow.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to comment to Mr. Blois talking about youth and agriculture, which is important, but the Liberals did cut the funding to 4-H and agriculture in the classroom, which the Conservatives have committed to reinstill. It's very important that we keep those young people involved and see agriculture as a very viable career opportunity. But specifically to transportation and labor, you know, Canada has lost, as I had mentioned earlier, our reputation as a trusted and reliable trading partner because we are not able to get our products to market on time, which is the key reason that we put forward those two critical platform planks. One is the energy and utility corridor that will go east, west, north, south to build those pipelines, hopefully bring an investor that will look at rail lines, fiber optics, all of these things that our agriculture community and industry needs to meet its full potential. But also to take a look at diversifying our ports. We rely much too much on Montreal and Vancouver. We have opportunities in Churchill, we have opportunities in Kitimat, Thunder Bay, perhaps Prince Edward Island, and certainly on other Atlantic coast ports that we need to expand. If we are going to once again deal with what's going on in the United States, we all talk today about diversifying our trade markets. If we don't have the infrastructure to access those markets, there's not much point getting there. And lastly, you know, my colleague from the Liberals talked about pilot projects and conversations. When it comes to interswitching, there's no more need for pilot projects. You know, we brought in the Fair Access to Grain Rail, Grain Growers Act in 2014. They've had a pilot project on interswitching a number of times. We know that this puts pressure on the rail lines to meet their commitments. Interswitching needs to be legislated. There's no more need for pilot projects. And there has to be consequences when the rail lines don't meet their commitments because this is, they can't use weather as the blame game all the time. They have to meet their commitments to ensure our products are moving.
Mr. Perron?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. As far as infrastructure is concerned, we've got a massive investment awaiting us to maintain, and we've had tragedies that were caused by deficient infrastructure. So this is the basis that when we talk, Mr. Barlow talk about service interruptions, I'm not the only one that is stumped at in front of the fact that they cannot see our merchandise to be delivered on time, and we deny the rights of the workers. The last conflict, it wasn't a strike, it was a lockout. It was they decided, they stopped delivering for several days even before the day of the lockout. When the president of UPA calls me on the North Shore, we refuse to move the grains, and the stoppage is in 5 days from now. So if people can plan ahead, so we have to adapt. So extremely complex. There's no magic solution, but we have to examine this closely. Manpower, labor. I repeat what I've said, or urgent proposition of subsidies, salary subsidies, if our industries in the agri-food sector, if we should slow down the production or stop. Everybody talks about the difficulty of recruiting labor. We have to keep them. It's 6 to 8 months of training to have an autonomous worker. So we don't want to lose them. And we know employment insurance doesn't work. The program is completely out of date. And this government is asking us for a third or fourth mandate. But in the meantime, it will take an emergency measure. Rural infrastructure. We talked about slaughterhouses. I think there's a serious lack in this sector also.
I'm going to jump in because we talked about rural infrastructure in cellular and internet. One of the things that we have moved demonstrably on in this country is better broadband across the country. 95% of Canadians now are connected to 50/10. There's more work to be done, but I think demonstrably this government has made those investments. The next frontier is cell, and that will be a priority. Again, my portfolio includes that right now, so that will be a priority because I know that that is absolutely crucial. Just quickly on transit, we introduced the Rural Transit Fund. It's a $250 million fund over 5 years that is investing in smaller transit systems in rural Canada. That matters. Look, the Conservatives voted against these types of measures, did not speak well of them, despite the fact that they're benefiting communities that they
We hid
represent.
them in a massive spending budget. Like, be honest about when we voted against these things. And again, you're talking about conversations and pilot projects. You know, you've had these pilot projects.
250
but you're
million
just-
is not conversations. That's real
What
money.
Canadian farmers want is action on some of these issues that you've had 9 or 10 years to address, and you haven't done it. They don't believe you now.
New sheriff
Kody.
in town, John, you want to live it back? We're moving forward.
Your
This is
cabinet
where
is the
this is
same.
where
The cabinet
Liberal-
ministers are the same. The
Minister's
MPs are
not
the same.
and
The
things
leader
are
is the
way.
same.
Well, we'll get to that in a
Everything
minute
is the
here, John.
same.
We'll get to that in a minute. Would you like to go, Monsieur
Oui,
Perron?
bien, bien
Wanna be
sûr.
nice.
Merci, c'est gentil.
Thank you. In fact, what you need, the government, we need intelligent people who work jointly. I invite the people to see how we can work transversely. It takes a parliament that's diversified. When you hear people, whether from the Liberal Party or from the Conservatives, to ask for strong mandates, what they want to do, whatever they want, without having any opposition, without any checks and balances from the opposition, especially on questions like infrastructure, the investments that are necessary. It takes several heads to bring something that works.
Farmers are obviously concerned about infrastructure investment, but they're also concerned about keeping that infrastructure moving. And labor disruption has been a major issue for Canada the past number of years.
Shaun, if I can, just quickly on that, if I could.
Look, I'll let Dr.
Sure.
Rodriguez go first.
So you're asking me
How
whether
do we
this is
keep-
important? Of
how do we
course it
keep
is.
people
I
work-
was
how do we
saying that
keep people
earlier.
working?
Yeah, we need the labor force where we need it. Like the industry cannot function without people. It's about the people, and it also cannot function without the infrastructure to move things around. And those two things are very, very important for the Green Party because we
Yeah.
understand the connection between them.
Mr. Bar-
Yeah.
We have really important grants available for apprentices right now, but also just in terms of those tough decisions. We believe in collective bargaining in terms of the unionized workforce on the rails, but Minister McKinnon made, I think, the right but difficult decision to make sure, look, we can't have both railroads out at the same time. So unless some of the parties are suggesting that we're going to introduce emergency legislation or have those types of corridors, we believe in collective bargaining, but our government will intervene as necessary to protect the corridors of this country.
Mr.
On
Perron,
devrait
is
être
there a better
capable sur le
way?
long terme de
We should be able to look at that question, actually, to not take the rights away from collective bargaining. I don't want to be in that situation again, and I don't want producers to be in that situation either. So now's the time. I invite people who will be elected to work on that right away to see how we can not just have a law that gets rid of everything.
Unions have now come in support of a Conservative government under Pierre Poilievre because of the frustration they've had under the last 9 years of a Liberal government. These workers want a government that's going to stand up for them, and that's what we're going to do.
Okay, we're out of time. We could go for, Martin, I think for a very long time, and I really appreciate all the candidates and their participation here. What we're going to do now is we're going to have the closing remarks from each of the candidates, and we're going to work in reverse order. And you'll each have 1 minute. Please stick to the 1 minute, please.
minutes, no, Shaun?
And no, 1 minute for closing arguments. And we'll start with Mr. Blois.
Look, right now is a really crucial time for Canada, and I would submit to you that a Mark Carney Liberal-led government is not only the best for Canada, but it's the best for agriculture in this country. We are the only Federalist party that is standing on the stage here tonight that has actually put concrete actions into place that are specific to the agriculture sector. We are 1 day away from advanced polls, and I like my friend Mr. Barlow, but there has not been a specific mention from Mr. Poilievre about the agriculture sector in this country. It's because they expect that you will just go out and vote Conservative. They are not actually. They're taking you for granted, frankly. A Liberal government under Mark Carney is going to put agriculture in the driver's seat of our plan to have the strongest economy in the G7. Under my leadership, we are going to be focused on competitiveness. We're going to be focused on finding export markets around the world. We will protect supply management, not just talk about it at the very last minute of an election campaign. We will be there for Canadian farmers. It will be the focus of my work and the work of our government. I'm asking you to go out and support your Liberal candidate this weekend because the Conservatives are taking you for granted.
Ms. Ray?
My ancestor, Isaac Garbett, is on the wall at the Peterborough Agricultural Wall of Fame. And he's known for being a huge wave of agriculture back in the 1800s in Peterborough region. And he bought seeds at large, vast quantities and distributed them as cooperatives in the community and helped teach farmers how to grow more sustainably and how to be innovative and update their protocols. The NDP is rooted in farmers. We were created by farmers. And farmers' voices need to be the ones in the driver's seat. For too long now, the Conservatives and the Liberals have went back and forth, not solving our agricultural crises, not providing more opportunity for new farmers. Land cost is going up, input costs are going up. Farmers are holding on for dear life to the farms that they have, and it's time for a change. We need a strategy across Canada. We need to be leaders in sustainability. We need to make sure that our future generations are still going to be on the land, and we can do that with NDP.
Mr. Perron?
You saw the work that we've done in the past 6 years. Quebec agriculture, our voice, and the rest of Canada. You saw the constructive work that we have been able to do. We're not, as independent workers, we're not here to stick sticks in spokes. We want to be constructive. In the next negotiations with the U.S., there will be some huge challenges. If we're not there to raise the red flag, to put our foot down and to sound the alarm and to bring others to order across the country, then there will be issues. We need training with the Bloc very substantially to have a voice on Parliament Hill. Over the past 6 years, we were often the adult in the room, and you can watch the House of Commons clips. You'll see what happened when we were the ones talking about all the foreign arrivals. Agriculture needs diversified representation. We're there for that. Thank you very much.
More to defend Canadian agriculture in opposition than the Liberals have done in 10 years in government. Passed legislation on succession planning, financial assistance for our producers, raised the issue of right to repair, and certainly have gotten the Liberals to back down on the carbon tax, the capital gains tax hike, the underused housing tax, Bear Trust tax, and all these other initiatives that they've brought forward. And nothing is going to change. It is the same cabinet, the same MPs, with a leader who is the financial advisor to Justin Trudeau for 5 years. Farmers have a choice to make in this election. You either choose a conservative, common sense government that is going to put the focus on science, innovation, and productivity, give farmers a voice for the first time in 10 years, or a Liberal government that is going to make their decisions based on activism and ideology. We need to focus on productivity, and we need to focus on what is best for Canadian farmers. We have been that voice for 10 years. We will continue to be that voice for Canadian agriculture.
Dr. Rodriguez?
There is a misconception that the Greens are one-issue party, and we're not. But there is one principle that distinguishes the Green Party from others, and it's this focus on ecological wisdom, the idea that there's understanding of the natural world that we're part of, where all things are connected. In nowhere this is more evident than in this business of agriculture that brings us here today. In this debate, we saw the connection between, we talked about the economic environment, sustainability, we connected it to business risk management, the regulatory environment, infrastructure, labor. All of these things came together in this debate, and they are all connected. So agriculture happens in natural and human environments, and in all their complexity. And farmers are the stewards of this environment. Farmers sustain and are sustained by communities, and there cannot be sustainable agriculture without sustainable rural communities.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
that's it. We did it, Martin. That's the end of this evening's debate. I want to encourage all Canadians from coast to coast to coast that are watching tonight to get out and vote on April 28th. On behalf of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, our sponsor this evening as well, Food, Health and Consumer Products of Canada, Martin and myself, thank you for joining us this evening. We hope tonight's discussion has provided valuable insight to help inform your decision in the upcoming election. We appreciate your time and your interest in the future of Canadian agriculture. As you can see from the 5 parties that participated here tonight, there's some similarities, but there also is some differences, and I hope this evening sheds some light. Have a great night. Cheers, everyone.